FPS Win. Written by
嘟嘟雪球
Chapter 387. On the evening of the day the plan was made, Peng Shuqing booked the earliest flight to Indonesia. This is the execution ability of Dongfeng Group. In this group, which was born out of a mercenary group, there will never be lengthy meetings and complicated decision-making processes. Things that have been decided can be immediately sent down to the execution level. For safety reasons, Peng Shuqing acted as the first guinea pig and used Bao Xiaomei's new connections to go to Yunnan, and then boarded a plane in Yunnan using his Bagan passport. Everything went smoothly. When Chen Chen finished dealing with the affairs in Dakali and rushed to Myanmar, Peng Shuqing had already arrived in Indonesia and was ready to carry out his first mission. That is, get the plane back. Air superiority is overwhelming on any battlefield. We only have one helicopter now, and air superiority is completely insufficient. However, if we can have 3 fixed-wing aircraft providing fire support in the air, it will basically be enough. Therefore, Chen Chen still attaches great importance to this matter. In fact, Peng Shuqing's handling of the situation was quite smooth. That evening after arriving in Indonesia, he reached a new agreement with Yubin, determined the export order by leveraging the foreign trade relations of Yubin's company, and quickly began to arrange export matters, deciding to export parts and spare parts to be shipped to Pubay via Laos. The reason for not transporting the entire aircraft is mainly to bypass the processing of procedures such as airworthiness certificate, radio license, etc. Such an operation would not be feasible in any country with a complete aircraft management system. But fortunately Pubay is not among them, so the operation is not difficult. All Chen Chen had to do was to make all preparations, find a good pilot and weapon operator, and ensure that the plane could fly after it arrived. In fact, contrary to what many people think, the operating threshold of fixed-wing aircraft, especially small fixed-wing aircraft, is much lower than that of helicopters. Seaplanes are slightly more complicated, but not much more complicated. Therefore, Chen Chen did not encounter too much difficulty in selecting the pilot. There was no need to even go through Xiaoyu. Lao Zhu mobilized his connections and found 6 mercenaries with rich flying experience near Dakali. As soon as the plane arrived, they could be in position at the same time. This matter was completed smoothly, and after returning to Myanmar, Chen Chen began to inspect and assign new recruits. Accompanied by Jackal, he visited the newly built training base in Myanmar. As soon as he walked into the gate of the base, Chen Chen immediately felt a familiar feeling. You copied these barracks and facilities directly without making any changes. Chen Chen said with a smile on his face. What's there to change? This is the most scientific layout, there's no need to change it. You see, although the people you recruited are all veterans, I dare say that not every one of them has passed the basics 100%, so I have retained the basic training area, and this area occupies the largest area. After all, they have retired for a while. According to my training schedule, everyone needs to go through a week of recovery training after entering the camp. Only those who can pass it can enter the next stage of training. Of course, I'm just a service provider and have no right to decide whether someone stays or leaves, but I will report the training situation to Lao Zhu truthfully and let him make the decision. You should have received instructions before, right? How is it going? Is it going well? Chen Chen nodded slightly, then said, third-party evaluation is indeed more reasonable. But please don't use the word ask for instructions in the future, okay? Why can't it be used? Because it feels like it was appointed. The Jackal scratched his head in confusion. He didn't seem to understand the difference between consult and advice. However, Chen Chen was too lazy to explain it to him. He just continued to move forward to visit other advanced training facilities. Large-scale CQB facilities have been built in the Myanmar camp, and in order to adapt to the combat environment of the Dongfeng Corps, the entire CQB module is divided into a total of 5 parts, each with different architectural features. Ordinary urban buildings, ordinary courtyard buildings, scattered village buildings, jungle camps, and mud brick structures with Middle Eastern characteristics. At this time, 2 teams were conducting a confrontation drill in the courtyard-style building. The attacking side was made up of new recruits, and the defending side was a 3-man team from Chaseley. Chen Chen watched with interest for a while, and then found that his new recruits were indeed lacking in CQB skills. He was unskilled in the use of throwing objects, his steps were not smooth, and the corner-cutting line was too abrupt, which made Chen Chen frown. The battle lasted only 30 seconds from start to end, and the attacking side was completely wiped out. The instructor standing by looked calm. After simply pointing out the problem, he ordered the attackers to return to their positions and restart the attack. Chen Chen watched for 5 minutes. The attacking side attacked 9 times with full intensity, leaving no time for review and summary. What's going on? Chen Chen asked. Muscle memory training. The Jackal answered calmly, and then continued. The review will be held after the fast-paced training. Now the main thing is to let them get the feel for it. This training method is very effective. You have to know that one day ago, this team could only last 10 seconds and was declared the loser after entering the goal. But now, they can knock out 1 or 2 defenders and last more than 30 seconds. After hearing what the Jackal said, Chen Chen nodded thoughtfully, which was considered as basic approval. But deep down, he still felt that he hadn't done enough. So he walked to the vicinity of the venue, intending to test it himself. The instructor of CQB was Big Bird. When he saw Chen Chen coming over, he stood at attention with a snap, and his prosthetic limbs made a banging sound. Hello, Chief. Please review our inspection. After the words fell, Chen Chen was stunned. Speak properly. How is the situation now? Hearing Chen Chen's words, Big Bird chuckled and replied, Captain, I am keeping up with the times. Now we all call you Sir Chief, and you are no exception. The situation is not bad. There are some results from the training, but to be honest, the new recruits nowadays are too mechanical and lack flexibility. I'm still trying to figure it out. Maybe I'll take them out to play some more to get a feel for it. This is indeed a problem. You know, this batch of new soldiers were basically recruited from the north, and the soldiers who retired at this time basically had one characteristic. That is, all their training is in preparation for large-scale combat. They don't need to learn any overly sophisticated close-range combat tactics, but instead focus more on large-scale group combat. In this situation, The focus of soldiers' combat is not how to exert their flexibility and initiative, but to maximize their obedience and serve as a good screw on the battlefield. Their tactical movements tend to be more rigid and fixed steps, but CQB is most averse to rigid combat scenes. It is normal that they cannot adapt to it for a while. To change this situation, we must rely on high-intensity training. The so-called muscle memory training is one of the methods. When Chen Chen transferred to special operations, he also went through this process. However, what really changed his thinking was another training method, the so-called Module D training method. This thing was derived from the U.S. Army Special Forces SFQC course. Its core idea is to allow soldiers to fully understand the mission planning and mission execution process of special operations through extensive trial and error and free decision-making, and to repeatedly strengthen the effects through actual exercises, and to provide uninterrupted positive and negative feedback, so as to ultimately achieve the goal of rapidly transforming combat thinking. To put it simply, the core of this training method is actually just one, that is free play. When Chen Chen participated in this training, the concept of AI was not yet mature, but looking back now, the training in Module D is actually to treat people as AI, without presetting any tactics or giving any guidance. After the basic skills and basic theories have matured, people are thrown into the battlefield and allowed to play freely. In this way, the subjective initiative of all trainees will be released to the maximum, and their understanding of tactics will quickly rise from the level of commands and rules to principles and choices. And now, these new recruits have obviously reached the standard for executing Module D training. So Chen Chen decisively spoke up and said to Big Bird, "From now on, add an hour of free organization to the daily training. In this session, don't preset any combat scenarios or give any instructions. There is only one goal, to eliminate the enemies in the house at any cost. Regardless of whether the task can be completed or not, we will review and summarize after the 1-hour training. Let them summarize it themselves." Advertisement. At the same time, video recording equipment should be introduced so that they can watch their own videos and find the problems themselves. Clear. Big Bird answered immediately, and, without wasting any time, he announced the order to the team members, and the first Module D training began immediately. Hearing his words, the 6 attacking players standing outside the CQB training area looked at each other. In the past few days, they have actually only done one thing, which is to practice routines continuously. Their minds are filled with theories about cutting corners, moving, scoring, splitting the ball through cover, changing hands, and shutting down, but in reality, what they can bring to bear is extremely limited. But now, the superiors suddenly let them play freely, and for a moment, they even felt a little at a loss. "Report!" someone in the crowd shouted. The Big Bird nodded, and the man continued to ask, "Any method will do? All is fine, but we can only rely on the existing equipment." "Clear." Big Bird answered decisively, and after hearing his words, the person who asked the question immediately took action. He was obviously the captain of the team. After a brief communication, the team redeployed their tactics and prepared for battle outside the door. They still use standard formations and standard personnel arrangements. From this point of view alone, their tactics don't seem to have changed much. Seeing this, the Jackal shook his head and said, "I originally thought that the soldiers in the north were the same as you, but now it seems that you are you and others are others, and there is still a big difference. These people have not yet realized their core weakness. It's not a problem of basic skills, but a problem of reaction speed and tactical breadth. Although the battlefield in CQB is small, the situation is ever-changing, and a small detail can completely change the situation. Even if the defender only changes the firing order, you must come up with at least 3 response plans to properly handle the situation. They are far worse than you in this regard. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see." Chen Chen replied without comment. What Jackal said was of course right, but Chen Chen also had great confidence in these new recruits. He didn't think that these people were just idiots who were just following the rules. He had already made clear the conditions for free action. If they still remained unchanged, he might as well eliminate them all. At this time, the attacking side has already begun. Following the standard CQB door-breaking position, the 6 people completed the door-breaking, skillfully used throwing objects, then skillfully entered the building, and skillfully wiped out the entire army after 30 seconds. It seems that it still doesn't work. The Big Bird standing nearby shook his head in disappointment. But at this time, Jackal and Chen Chen's eyes had already lit up. "Very strong," the Jackal said with emotion. "Yes, the reaction was very quick. Yes, this idea is very correct. I take back what I said just now." The Jackal breathed a sigh of relief and continued. "They had a different idea than you, but they also found another solution. Yes, this plan is more suitable for them. Yes, not everyone can reach your level of active thinking and knowledge reserves. This is the safest and most effective solution. I'll just say they won't disappoint. Indeed. How many more times do you think it will take them to take it down? I don't know. They are taking advantage of the defender's mistakes." Listening to the conversation between Chen Chen and the Jackal, Big Bird was filled with question marks. What is strong? What is the right scheme? Isn't this the simplest and most standard set of offensive procedures? Where is the change? He didn't have time to ask more questions because at this time, the players from both sides had returned to their positions and were ready for the second battle. Break the door, throw objects to close the dangerous corner on the right, break in, deploy, and annihilate the entire army. 48 seconds. Big Bird finally understood what the attacking team was doing. They're slowing down. The most taboo thing in CQB combat is slowing down, but that depends on the situation. When the coordination is not good enough, slowing down is the most correct way to play. There is a classic judgment in CQB called slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And these attacking players found the essence directly without anyone mentioning this point to them. To be precise, they are not slowing down, but breaking down the movements. Compared with the previous attack, their unskilled goal-scoring action slowed down, and they reorganized and slightly adjusted their positions after scoring. But in contrast, the action of breaking through is accelerated due to the adjustment of the position, reducing the exposure time in the death hourglass zone. And then, the deployment speed was slowed down again. They used the lives of the assaulters to buy 2 seconds of preparation time for the team members in the rear, and these 2 seconds were enough for them to find their targets in the chaos. The killing accuracy rate has been greatly improved, and the frequency of erroneous operations has been significantly reduced. Although the army was still completely defeated, it was obvious that success was just around the corner. No need to look any further. You will definitely pass. The Jackal sighed and pulled Chen Chen out of the CQB area. Then he continued to ask, will other teams also explore this style of play? Or does each team have a different solution? I don't know. Maybe some people will choose the strategy of slowing down and dismantling, or maybe some people will take the wild path like we did in the beginning. But no matter what, they always find a way to solve the problem. Is it the purpose of being a mercenary to solve problems? Really? The Jackal nodded again, and then said, okay, keep watching. I think there should be many things in this camp that can surprise you. It took Chen Chen more than 2 hours to finish reading all the training content at the Myanmar base. CQB is just one of the most basic training subjects in this base. In fact, the real highlight is the subjects that are combined with equipment. Anti-tank and anti-armor training, air assault training, armored vehicle training, heavy weapon use training, artillery training, infantry tank coordination training. The maturity and completeness of the base far exceeded Chen Chen's imagination, and the area was also frighteningly large. In fact, this is also normal. After all, this base was originally converted from the Myanmar Army's Minku camp. After they withdrew, Dongfeng Group simply took over the base and claimed it for themselves. After Jackal took over the order for customized solutions, he also expanded the camp to a certain extent to meet the special training needs of the Dongfeng Corps. However, what puzzled Chen Chen was that Jackal seemed to have some obsession with IPSC and actually build another IPSC venue here. And according to him, this thing cost a lot of money, including the target electronic control system, etc. The total cost reached $200,000, and the quotation that Jackal gave to Chen Chen was directly doubled to $400,000. That I absolutely cannot afford to pay this. I don't care whether you keep this thing or tear it down. Anyway, my people will never use it. Don't tell me more about the benefits of IPSC for improving individual shooting skills. That's not what I want. We are mercenaries and PMCs, not the police. What we pursue is not to allow the enemy any room for resistance, not to confront the enemy head-on and then rely on so-called technology to fight for a glimmer of hope. Talking about IPSC with mercenaries is simply nonsense. If you have time to train, you might as well run another 5 kilometers. When you have more energy, bring 2 more grenades. All right. Hearing Chen Chen's words, Jackal looked at the field reluctantly and then said unwillingly, but I still like the sport. Then go play by yourself. Do you even know it's a sport? Chen Chen gave Jackal a look of disappointment and continued. Light triggers, reduced charge, extreme firing strategies, and even distorted gun-holding methods. None of these are truly suitable for actual combat. Even factory gun competitions have long been divorced from actual combat. People like you who have some knowledge of guns and combat are the easiest to fall into the trap. But do you know what your greatest luck is? It's that you don't have time to practice. Because once you really practice it, you will know that investing a lot of time in training how to improve your reaction time by 20 milliseconds and kill the enemy before they open fire is completely meaningless in actual combat. The reason is simple. There is no wall in this world that cannot be penetrated. What about the encounter? Like the cliff battle you told me about. If it weren't for your fast firing speed, you wouldn't have been able to hold the situation under such a disadvantage, right? Hearing this, Chen Chen sneered, shook his head and replied, the fundamental reason why we were able to maintain the situation in that battle was not because our killing efficiency was high enough, but because we had enough people, fought timidly enough, died slowly enough, and finally waited for support. I'm not saying IPSC is useless. I'm just saying that instead of letting our members spend a lot of time practicing this stuff, it's better to give them SFAR tech classes to improve their target detection and planning capabilities. We should not think about how to fight back if we are surrounded, but how to avoid being surrounded. Understood? Having said that, the Jackal was finally completely convinced. But you have to pay me because I can turn this venue into a simple dynamic shooting training ground. IPSC is useless, but you can't say that dynamic shooting training is useless too, right? $200,000 I won't give you a cent more. Make a deal. The Jackal chuckled and answered decisively. He has already earned enough money in this base, and considering his relationship with Chen Chen, there is really no need to worry about this small loss. The two walked out of the base together and took a car back to the Dongfeng Corps' office. After a brief conversation with the Jackal said goodbye and left. Through this inspection, Chen Chen has basically determined the basic situation of the team in his hands. Lao Zhu's execution ability is not amazing, but it is definitely enough. Among these 50 people, he crammed in more than 20 special forces, including tank and armored vehicle drivers, artillerymen, communicators, anti-tank fighters, and so on. Basically, this team has fully acquired the functions of an armored platoon-level combat unit, and there are even signs of overflowing firepower due to the mismatch between equipment and personnel. In other words, there is too much equipment and not enough people. However, Chen Chen was not worried about this, because he knew that the next battle could not be fought by his own side. The infantry to fill in the line can be drawn from the basic ranks of the coalition forces, while the more advanced auxiliary troops can be filled in by the private soldiers of Ibupa and Ibangxiong. Personnel preparations have basically been completed. It is expected that within 2 weeks, all these people will be pulled out to fight in actual combat. After experiencing the baptism of blood and fire, they will be able to go to the battlefield. We have to organize an exercise. Chen Chen scratched his head thoughtfully, then picked up the phone and called the white dog, whom he had been waiting for a long time but had no chance to meet. Not to mention the various kinds of concern that Go showed with his lackey-like demeanor. After a brief chat, Chen Chen asked, "Are there any good missions to complete recently? The scale should be a little bigger. Money is not important. The main thing is that the enemy should be strong enough to fight against." Enough to fight? The white dog repeated it blankly, seemingly not understanding what Chen Chen meant. "I plan to pull the team I have out to conduct a real combat exercise, This time, All personnel and armored units will be deployed to test our ability to fight as a system. You have to find a target for me. Don't let them surrender after 2 rounds of bombardment once the fight starts. Clear. The white dog thought for a moment and replied, there are no drug dealers left to fight in the vicinity. All the large-scale drug dealers in our territory have been eliminated. The remaining small fry can be dealt with by a combat team. As for the warlords, the coalition forces are opening up everywhere, and there is nothing left to fight with at the moment. If it doesn't work, how about attacking the Pamong camp? Do you know what you're talking about? Chen Chen rolled his eyes and continued. No matter how weak the Pamong battalion is, it is still Thailand's regular army. Even if we take away all political factors, do you think we can beat them in terms of hard power? Don't be ridiculous. They are a serious national force. They don't have to do anything, just call in a jet fighter and they can pin us down. Why didn't you tell us that we had attacked the Pamong camp? Why didn't we just launch a surprise attack on Washington and establish a party branch? Hearing this, the white dog scratched his head awkwardly, and after filtering out those unrealistic ideas in his mind, he finally replied, then there is no other choice but to fight the Kachin. Pick a peripheral stronghold and destroy it, and practice in battle. Where? Shiwu, the southern gate of Kachin, controls Highway 31. It is the gateway to Kachin and the starting point for our subsequent Kachin strategy. No, Chen Chen interrupted by Go before he could finish his words. Then he began to explain, Shiwu is too far from Mungka. It crosses the 3 power zones of Kokong, Hua State, and Northern Shan State. It is difficult to coordinate all aspects. It is okay for fighting, but it is absolutely impossible for training troops. Advertisement. Okay, but now that you put it that way, I do have an idea. Why don't we attack Xiao Mengla? CEO Mengla? Chen Chen was stunned, and then subconsciously asked. Lin Mingxian didn't seem to recruit us, did he? The white dog scratched his head and thought for a while, then replied, it seems that there really isn't one. But does it matter? This question left Chen Chen speechless. Indeed, does it matter? Little Mongla belongs to the territory of the Eastern Shan State Army, and has been in a special state for a long time. Due to the small territory and weak strength of Mengla, the strategy they have adopted has actually always been to maintain a neutral state in order to please both sides and be good at dealing with people. You said they tend to go to the north. In Chen Chen's memory, this is one of the most difficult places to manage. Under the leadership of Lin Mingxian, the management here is like a dead pig that is not afraid of boiling water. Once it makes a mistake, it will admit it but will never change. Until Chen Chen was reborn, drugs were still rampant here and could not be eradicated. The typical joke of Yushi exchanging ecstasy pills came from here. In addition, smuggling is rampant and gambling is prevalent here. Even after 2017, it has become a major disaster area for electronic fraud. The most crucial thing is that Lin Mingxian has an ambiguous relationship with the Bagan officials. He has received official medals awarded by the central government. He can be said to be the only special administrative region leader who has truly been officially recognized. In this case, his existence is actually a hidden mine. Once it breaks out, the trouble brought to Ximengla will probably be greater than that of Kokong. It must be dealt with. And now is indeed the best time. The Washan alliance has been formed, and Mongla has been wrapped up in it, largely cutting off its ties with Myanmar. Taking this opportunity to clean up the upper echelons of Mongla and replace them with a group of obedient people is the most reasonable choice. What? You said Lin Mingxian was very obedient and cooperative? Why should I care whether you cooperate or not? It is now 2011, and Chen Chen knows that in a few months, the Mengla hydropower station will be officially approved. This power station was designed by the Engineering Design Institute of Sichuan University and built by the Sichuan Water Conservancy and Hydropower Engineering Bureau. The various stories behind it are not known to outsiders, but in the final analysis, this is part of the Belt and Road Initiative's package of investment plans for Bagan. How can such an important task be in the hands of a fence-sitter? Hua State has confirmed its defection, and the northern and southern Shan states have also determined their positions. What is the need for your Mongla army to exist? Hand over the power and stop playing around. Thinking of this, Chen Chen nodded decisively, and then said, then take down Mengla. Let Bao Xiaomei talk to Lin Mingxian first. If Lin Mingxian can understand the current situation, that would be the best. If he doesn't know what's happening, then we'll teach him a lesson. Clear. Bai Go nodded decisively, then stood up and left Chen Chen's office. At this time, Lin Mingxian didn't know that the Dongfeng Corps had already included him in the list simply for the purpose of training. And all the characters on the Dongfeng Corps list will not have a good ending. 2 hours after seeing off the white dog, Chen Chen finally met the person he wanted to see most this time when he returned to Pubei. After meeting this person, the first news he brought to him made him extremely excited. Because that person said something. There's something wrong with Mongla's recent movements. Lin Mingxian may have sensed the crisis and has been in frequent contact with Bagan officials recently. It seems that he has also been in contact with Kachin. Did you notice him? Chen Chen asked with a little excitement. My goodness. I originally thought that this operation against Mengla would be the Dongfeng Corps' first active external expansion operation, but I didn't expect that the enemy would take the initiative to hand over the handle before the battle even started. Lin Mingxian, you are really a master of giving pillows. Seeing Chen Chen's expression, Xiu Yu, who had just rushed to Mengka from Mengla, was stunned for a moment, and then replied, how could we not pay attention to him? We used to have a lot of contact with Mengla, but recently many things have encountered difficulties. The project is not progressing smoothly, the border is unstable, and even Polytechnology's office in Mengla has encountered problems. We have spoken to Lin Mingxian implicitly, but he is not satisfied with the current situation. We still have to do something about it. How about just killing him? Chen Chen asked impatiently. Don't ask me. What you do is your business. It has nothing to do with me. Xiaoyu was almost choked by Chen Chen's positive attitude. After a few seconds of silence, she spoke. Mongla's living space has been compressed to the limit. The reason why a large-scale conflict has not broken out yet is entirely because of Lin Mingxian's historical roots with Hua State and Shan State. You will have a war sooner or later. You should discuss this matter with the Bao family and Ibangxiu. I see. Chen Chen interrupted Xiao Yu and tactfully skipped the topic, asking, what do you mean by Mengla having a connection with Kachin? How dare they do that? It's not a question of whether or not you dare. Xiao Yu shook his head and replied, you have basically controlled the entire Shan state, Hua state, and Kokong. When it comes to drug control, your attitude is quite firm. Although it is impossible to eradicate it once and for all, the wind direction from top to bottom is quite clear. And you also know that a large part of the drug trade in Pubei and the Golden Triangle is controlled by Wenbei. They have lost a lot of toxic soil and must find a new base. Now, drug production has shifted to chemical drugs. Mengla is a very poor place, so this is a perfect place for us to do this. Good job. Another unexpected success. Chen Chen originally planned to destroy Wenbang's peripheral economic pillars. In this case, isn't Mengla the most convenient target? Do you have any evidence? Of course, but I can't give it to you. This is classified information. Xiao Yu shook his head, but then asked back. But do you really need it? Really not necessary. As long as you have it, just make sure you didn't call the wrong person. I'm a mercenary, not a policeman. You can't read out the charges and hold a sanctions referendum before attacking Mengla, right? I've done it, so don't complain when I hit you. Thinking of this, Chen Chen nodded with satisfaction. In this case, even if Lin Mingxian doesn't die, he will probably have to leave the stage completely. The communication between Chen Chen and Xiao Yu was as efficient as ever. With just a few key words, both parties had guessed what the other was going to do and were clear about each other's attitudes. There is no doubt that for Xiao Yu, the best option would be to replace him with a group of more obedient people. Similarly, for Chen Chen, getting rid of or replacing Lin Xianming would also be beneficial to the subsequent development of Dongfeng Group. You know, Daluo is an important port, and it may become a main artery of Dongfeng Group in the future. No matter what, he couldn't bear to see this major artery in the hands of others. Dealing with Lin Xianming is an inevitable step in Dongfeng Group's strategic map, but before, he has always been inclined to deal with it in a gentler way. But now, this kind of moderation seems unnecessary. Everything is back on track, and the Dongfeng core is on the road again. There isn't much intrigue, and no need to consider complicated political struggles. In this land, everything can be solved with a gun. If guns can't solve the problem, use cannons or rockets. Wenbang? Kachin? CIA? Chen Chen only knew that these organizations that sounded mysterious and powerful were ultimately composed of carbon-based organisms. As long as it is a carbon-based organism, it is not afraid of fire. After finishing the serious business, Chen Chen finally had time to reminisce with Xiao Yu. Of course, he is not good at this part. Xiao Yu, on the other hand, seemed to want to break the awkwardness. She took out the card that Chen Chen had deposited with her and waved it in front of Chen Chen, saying, I should have let you carry this thing earlier. In that case, maybe you wouldn't have to take the bullet in your face. Hearing Xiao Yu's words, Chen Chen subconsciously touched the wound on his face that had not yet fully healed and asked, what's wrong? Is it ugly? Xiao Yu shook her head and replied, it's not ugly, it just doesn't fit the positive stereotype. Let's all get a full face lift, dye my hair blonde, put on some foundation, and wear a bomber jacket? Okay, pick up another European and American girl. Anyway, that Jia has also appeared. I guess you will meet soon. I am optimistic about you. Are you so well informed? Chen Chen looked at Xiao Yu in surprise, then stood up, opened the office door, and gestured to her to come in. Xiao Yu chuckled and walked out the door. Chen Chen followed closely behind. Seeing that Xiao Yu did not answer, he continued to ask, what happened to Jia? Is it related to the current situation? Xiao Yu shook her head and replied, I can't be sure yet. You don't have to think too highly of her. She is just a high-end political speculator. The changes in the situation in Thailand, including some of the measures taken against you, are ultimately the work of the CIA and Wenbang. They have already suffered too much at your hands. You must slow down no matter what. Tough military tactics won't get you any advantage, and it won't get to the point where we have to label you as a JD organization and impose sanctions, so it's normal to resort to this kind of tricks. One force can break all laws. Let him play his game, and you play your game. If you can conquer Kachin and completely change Pubei, you can completely ignore their little tricks. I think the same as I do. Great minds think alike. Chen Chen nodded in agreement. So the core is still Kachin and Wenbang. I have to finish these things as soon as possible. Maybe I can catch up with the mission in Syria. After hearing what Chen Chen said, Xiao Yu opened her mouth as if wanting to say something, but finally fell silent. Chen Chen didn't dare to ask any further questions, so the two of them walked out of the office and onto the street of Mengka. At this time, the environment in Mengka has taken a step in a positive direction compared to 2 months ago. Although it is impossible to completely eliminate all drug activities, this thing has completely disappeared from the streets. Even the signs of roadside hawker shops have been decorated with eye-catching logos. No drug users allowed. This slogan has a bit of postmodern magic flavor. Looking at the pheasants in front of the door, Xiao Yu said with a smile, don't tell me, Ibupa really has some tricks up his sleeve. Advertisement. Du and Huang have always been deeply bound together. Now he can actually think of using one demand to defeat another demand. This is a very smart attempt. It all comes down to money. Chen Chen sighed and continued. The 7th Brigade absorbed Zhao Zhaoyang's legacy, and now has the mineral resources of Wishai as a foundation. They will not be short of money in the next 1 or 2 years. With the confidence to fight against drugs, how could he not think of how to do it? In that case, it is Lin Xianming who is a little ignorant. With the Daluo port behind him, he is about to usher in a historic development opportunity, but he still wants to go back to the old ways. This is also a point we cannot figure out. Xiao Yu's face was as dark as water. After a pause, he continued, maybe he had some reason to do this. I can't care less. The knife has been handed to me. It would be impolite not to wield it. After this vote is completed, the entire Pubei will basically enter a new situation. At that time, we will be able to have more in-depth exchanges. Hearing this, Xiao Yu nodded thoughtfully, and then said, the Kachin are not easy to fight. Unlike other forces, the Kachin are the only force that has the potential to receive external support. Now that Thailand has joined the game, I even suspect that once the action starts, Thailand will directly provide them with weapons and equipment support. Not to mention the CIA, people from Siasad may even directly participate in the war. You have to be careful. You may soon encounter the first assassination in your life. I've already encountered this, okay? Chen Chen said with a disdainful pout. You don't think that the actions organized by Nakam at that time were worthy of being called assassinations, do you? Not calling. If you continue to argue with me, I will tear your face into pieces. Xiaoyu glared at Chen Chen angrily, and then continued. Real assassinations are far more sinister and complicated than what you have encountered. If you are not prepared, you won't even know how you died until you die. In short, protect yourself. You'd better take this card of peace of mind. I think you need it more than I do. No. Do you really believe it? Chen Chen took the no problem sign, looked at Xiaoyu in surprise and asked. In fact, he didn't believe in this kind of thing at all. The reason he prepared it for Xiaoyu was, on the one hand, as a token of his appreciation, and on the other hand, to get a good start. I really hope this thing can bless me with peace, even if it loses its mind. We are all staunch proletarian fighters. How could any of us believe in metaphysics? However, Xiaoyu did not feel embarrassed or awkward at all about his reaction. She just grabbed Chen Chen's hand and slapped the nothing to worry about card into his hand, then said seriously, you know this is impossible, and I don't know either, but everyone knows it. But everyone is always willing to believe. We don't really expect it to bring safety. We just hope that the person who carries it will be safe. Understand? Then you should keep it for yourself. Chen Chen pushed the nothing to do card back to Xiaoyu, and then said in the same serious tone, give me another helicopter. I'll be safer than anyone else. While Chen Chen and Xiaoyu were discussing how to further strengthen the firepower of the Dongfeng Corps in order to carry out a sufficiently convincing persuasion to surrender against Xiao Mengla under the leadership of Lin Mingxian. In Mengla, just a few dozen kilometers away from Mengka, in an ordinary office, two men were having a conversation of great importance. The person sitting on the left side of the sofa was undoubtedly Lin Mingxian, the chief of the 4th Special Zone, and the person sitting opposite him was a man whom Chen Chen had never seen before but had already heard of his name. Deputy Commander of the Kachin Army, head of external liaison for the Kachin Army, member of the FPNCC, and one of the first ethnic armed group leaders to visit the United States in a public capacity in 2014. It would be reasonable for such a person to appear anywhere, but at this sensitive time point, he actually overcame numerous obstacles and appeared in Mengla, which is unreasonable in a reasonable way. His appearance actually represents a certain attitude. Conversely, Lin Mingxian's personal reception of him also represents Mengla's attitude. From the moment they met, the two parties had actually reached an agreement. What they were discussing now were just the specific details of the cooperation. Looking at Gan Mao, who looked confident, Lin Mingxian sighed softly and said, General, we have received your proposal, but if I may be frank, it is a betrayal to us. We have a close relationship with Kokong, and you can't be unaware of the relationship between Mr. Peng and me. Under the circumstances, if you want me to cooperate with you and betray Mr. Peng's friends, I'm afraid I can't do it. What's more, when the situation is basically stabilized and everyone is thriving and seeking development, we are provoking a war again, which is unpopular from any perspective. An unjust war will never be won. I still want to advise the general to think more about it. Maybe this time, we should really take a step back and follow the general trend. Lin Mingxian's remarks were very high-sounding, with both high-sounding and emotional content. If it were a player of a lower rank, he would probably have misinterpreted his meaning and thought he was a righteous man who was loyal, filial, and farsighted. But neither of the two people present was a fool. The fact that Gan Mounting represented Kachin in visiting the United States 3 years later had already proved that he was very capable in mediation. So, he immediately understood the hidden meaning of Lin Mingxian's words. In the final analysis, isn't it just that the benefits are not enough? What is a Peng Jiaxing? Not to mention that he is already very old and Kokong is far away from Mengla. From the perspective of interests, as long as the money is enough, there is nothing that Lin Mingxian can't do. When Bai Suoqing rebelled before, was Lin Mingxian really not supporting them because of the so-called illusory friendship? Stop being funny. To put it bluntly, isn't it because the spoils are not divided equally? Bai Suoqing is not as generous as the Peng family. As long as the money is enough, he can kill his own father. Who is Peng Jiaxing? Who is Peng Diren? Thinking of this, Gan Mao pretended to sigh with regret, and then said, I can understand Mr. Lin's difficulties, but I still say, I hope Mr. Lin can face reality. Now is not the time to talk about humanity or reason. The enemy has pushed us into a corner. If we don't fight back, we will lose everything. You can see that Hua State, Shan State, and Kokong have been connected, and the entire Pubei area has fallen into their hands. Karen is far away in southern Myanmar, and can be said to be isolated in a corner, and can't play a big role in the overall situation. Other small-scale militias are more like bandits than armed forces. We can't rely on them to accomplish anything. If we want to save the situation, we can only rely on us. We can only rely on Kachin and Mongla. We know this, and the enemy certainly knows it too. So, even if we do nothing, you and I will become the next target of the so-called coalition forces. The lesson of Zhao Jiaoyang is still before our eyes. After hearing Gan Mao's words, Lin Mingxian remained silent. Of course he was aware of these things, and he had already made preparations before Gan Mao even came. But what you think of yourself is different from what others say. The same thing was said again by Gan Mao, as if it had become an unquestionable fact. He became more and more determined, and some strategies that he had already conceived became more specific. But he knew that it was a time like this, and he couldn't easily express his opinion. You have to let the other party make an offer, and then when the price is high enough, you can reluctantly agree to it. So he said, I don't believe they will do anything bad to us Mengla. Mongla is an important part of the Washan United Army's plan. The pagan railway will most likely pass through our territory. Of course, even if it does not pass through our territory, the Daluo port will become an important port because of this railway. At the same time, We are also preparing to cooperate with the North to build a secondary hydropower station on the Namle River, which represents a major step forward in our bilateral relations. Look, General, I really can't think of any reason why I should turn against them in such a good situation. But it's still living under someone else's roof, isn't it? Gan Mao lowered his voice a bit and spoke calmly. This is not called living under someone else's roof. It should be called win-win cooperation. Win-win cooperation is just a trick to fool children. Mr. Lin, I don't think we need to take too many detours. You know, I was originally responsible for mediation and communication, and you're also very good at dealing with people. It would be really tiring for the two of us to play charades. Why not be more direct and speak frankly? Gan Mao leaned back on the sofa, his whole body showing a defenseless and relaxed posture, while Lin Mingxian thought silently for a few seconds and suddenly said, let's not talk about how to distribute the benefits first. Why do you think we can beat them? Speaking of this step, Gan Mao finally made a breakthrough. He let out a long sigh and answered with relief. In terms of military strength, they do have the advantage. But in terms of equipment, they may not have an advantage. They have lost state. Do you think they don't have an advantage in equipment? They have several helicopters. Lin Mingxian shook his head and questioned. So what if we have helicopters? We can have individual anti-aircraft missiles. Based on the skills of the Wa pilots, how many missiles can they withstand? They have armored vehicles. We have it too, you don't, but you can have it. When Gan Mao finished speaking, Lin Mingxian's heart suddenly jumped. He vaguely guessed what Gan Mao meant, but in this situation, he didn't know whether he should speak it out. So, he just asked tentatively, do we have other foreign aid? Certainly. Gan Mao nodded confidently, and then said, there are many people who do not want to see the situation in Pubei develop in this direction, and even less do they want Beijing to stand firm at this point in time. So, they are willing to pay for our actions, or should I say, sponsor them. Hearing his words, Lin Mingxian nodded slowly and solemnly, and then continued to ask, to what extent can it be achieved? In short, we can have armored vehicles, advanced missiles, and heavy weapons. These things will be shipped in from far away, bypassing their sphere of influence, and delivered to your hands. Of course, you may not be able to obtain heavy equipment, so you'll have a harder time. Advertisement. But I promise that while you guys are fighting, we will also enter the battlefield and share the pressure for you. We are very confident that Kokong will never participate in this war. Our first battle will be a decisive battle with Wa State. And the only ones you need to deal with are the Shan State Army and the Dongfeng Corps. How about it, Mr. Lin? Can this condition convince you? It's tempting indeed. Lin Xianming frowned. He vaguely felt that there was a great opportunity in front of him. Yes, the Dongfeng Corps is very strong, and the North and South Shan State armies are also very strong. They traveled across Pubei, captured Dakali, and even controlled a vast area. But are they really united internally? Can they really afford the cost of failure? No, it is not possible. The core of the Shan State Army is not the Shan State Army, but the Dongfeng Corps. If we can wipe out the Dongfeng Corps in one fell swoop, wouldn't the matter be over? Now, the northern and southern Shan State armies have deployed heavy troops in Tachalike. They are facing pressure from many sides and are stretched thin in terms of both manpower and equipment. The only one I really want to fight is Mengka. There were only less than 500 defenders from the Mengka 7th Brigade and a few dozen Dongfeng Corps soldiers. Even if they had tanks, so what? The man in front of him had already promised to provide equipment. Even if the missile is just a single soldier missile, it is a high-tech weapon that I had never dared to imagine. Lin Mingxian couldn't believe that with such support, he couldn't beat the Dongfeng Corps. They were not gods. He had 4 brigades and 5,000 soldiers. Could it be that he couldn't even beat 50 people? Lin Mingxian was completely convinced. He said, I have no problem. But we can't just start fighting, right? It will do us no good to declare war head-on. We should. Boss Lin, you don't need to worry about this. Gan Mao finally put his mind at ease. He interrupted Lin Mingxian and continued. Before this, we have already conducted some tests. Of course, objectively speaking, the effect was average, but it did cause them trouble. We will attack them from 3 directions. Cut off the economy, kill the leaders, and capture the cities. Capturing cities and engaging in large-scale decisive battles are the final steps. Before that, we have a lot to do. We need your cooperation. This is one of the reasons why I found you today. Assassination? Lin Mingxian's eyes narrowed, and he asked in a low voice. Gan Mao put down the teacup in his hand and nodded slowly. We need an opportunity, Mr. Lin. You need to create this opportunity for us. Impossible. Lin Mingxian shook his head without hesitation, and then said, you don't know the Dongfeng Corps, nor do you know the mercenary called Shipwreck. He is very cautious. I would even say that he is the most cautious person I have ever met. You have no way of finding an opportunity to assassinate him. If you do find one, it is likely that he has intentionally revealed a flaw. That's just for conventional means. Gan Mao interrupted Lin Mingxian again, and then said, but this time, we have something new. You don't need to know too much. You just need to help us do one thing. Get Chen Chen out. If he leaves his base one step, he will surely die. Or, there's another option. Find a way to get your people to him. That person doesn't have to do anything, not even physical contact, but just needs to see him. That's it. Gan Mao's words even seemed a bit like Arabian Nights to Lin Mingxian. However, from the other party's confident expression, he also guessed who the force providing help this time was. Therefore, Lin Mingxian did not ask any more questions. Instead, after careful consideration, he answered, it's impossible to get him to leave the base. Even if he leaves, he will be sitting in an armored vehicle. Can you destroy the armored vehicle? There is a chance, but it's quite difficult. Gan Mao answered frankly. So that means we have a better chance if we send our people into his territory. Let me think about it. Lin Mingxian frowned, and after a long while, he suddenly said, there's only one reason to meet him. Surrender. I will join the coalition forces and become their vassal. In order to eliminate their suspicion, of course, it is a conditional vassal. We need to negotiate, and this is the opportunity. I need to talk to the Bao family, and maybe Peng Diren as well. Then it's up to you. Gan Mao nodded with satisfaction. He was very satisfied with Lin Mingxian's reaction. In his opinion, the other party was the real hero who knows the times. That's right, the Dongfeng Corps still doesn't know what kind of enemy they are facing. Shadow Legion? MPRI? These teams are very strong, but there are always too many uncontrollable, unexpected factors in a head-on confrontation, so their failure is understandable. But what if Syosad is the one that ends up in trouble? Many people have never even heard of this name, but Gan Mao knows that if the Navy SEALs are the ceiling of special forces, then Syosad is the ceiling of intelligence and spies. In the scope of combat, the Dongfeng Corps may be able to fight the Navy SEALs, but what about in the field of espionage? At least, this is not your specialty, right? The gap is there, and Syosad experts never fail. At least I have never heard of any cases where they failed. Assassination? Forget it. Just rely on those people in Syosad. They have been trying to kill Castro for years, but they haven't succeeded yet. It sounds high-end, but it's just SO in reality. I guess it's not as good as some of the anti-traitor departments in the north. Just don't give them the chance. From now on, I will only stay in the base and will not show up until the war officially begins. I just don't believe it. They can't even see me. So how can they kill me? What's going on? Send a predator to drop a blade missile from the sky. If they really dare to do this, it will be like tearing our relationship apart. If the missile doesn't kill me, don't blame me for going to the Middle East to buy dirty bombs in the office of the Eastern Corps. Chen Chen slumped on the sofa indifferently. If Xiaoyu hadn't been there, he would have wanted to put his feet on the coffee table. Seeing his demeanor, Xiaoyu frowned and coughed, then said, "Can you sit properly?" Chen Chen didn't expect her to say this first, so he had to sit up obediently. He wanted to say a few more words to Xiaoyu, but she raised her hand to stop him, and then said, "You don't understand real assassination operations. Your understanding of assassination is very superficial. Do you think what you did before, setting up a sniper rifle from hundreds of meters away and smashing someone's head, is assassination? Come on, that can only be called a raid. I've said it many times before. The real assassination happens invisibly. It is even possible that you are already in the midst of an assassination at this very moment. The water you drink may be poisonous. The air you breathe may contain deadly germs. There may be a bomb hidden under your cup, and even a person with a gun may be hiding in your new sofa. So stop smiling at me. From now on, you have to listen to what I say." Seeing Xiaoyu's serious expression, Chen Chen scratched his head subconsciously and said, "I'm not taking it lightly. I just think that things may not develop so quickly. No, things will always develop faster than you expect. This is the bottom line we must absolutely adhere to." Xiaoyu interrupted Chen Chen without hesitation, and this time, Chen Chen finally stopped refutation and nodded solemnly, answering, "Don't worry, I haven't let my guard down. I have strengthened all the guard posts and prohibited all strangers from entering or leaving. Now this base can be said to be closed. Don't worry, I know what's going on." Hearing his answer, Xiaoyu finally breathed a sigh of relief. That's what she's most worried about. In fact, she was not afraid of the so-called assassination because through her day-to-day training, she had already mastered all possible assassination processes. She was very confident that she would react immediately to any action against Chen Chen that revealed any flaw. However, to deal with such attacks, relying solely on external forces is definitely not enough. Only when the target remains sufficiently vigilant, or even fearful, can danger be avoided to the greatest extent possible. And it was obvious that although Chen Chen appeared calm on the surface, he never relaxed in his heart from beginning to end. Thinking of this, Xiaoyu said, "Be more serious in front of me from now on. It's part of my job, you see? Clear." Chen Chen nodded again, and Xiaoyu spread out the documents in his hand, intending to give Chen Chen a good anti-assassination course. But at this moment, there was a sudden knock on the office door, and then, after getting Chen Chen's permission, Bao Xiaomei pushed the door open and walked in. Xiaoyu looked at her, and the latter's eyes became a little complicated, but in the end, she nodded politely to Xiaoyu, and then looked at Chen Chen, who was sitting next to her. "Mr. Chen, Lin Mingxian has already responded, and they are willing to have further communication with us. We have initially drawn up several plans and plan to organize a multi-party meeting within 2 days. The location, personnel, and time have not yet been determined, but in order to show his sincerity, Lin Mingxian has sent a representative to communicate with us about the relevant schedule issues. He's waiting outside the base now. Do you want to meet him?" Hearing Bao Xiaomei's words, Chen Chen's brows immediately frowned. It is certainly good news that Lin Mingxian is willing to communicate. But the problem is that according to their own rules, no one should enter or leave the base during this time period. At the same time, there is really no way to discuss this kind of thing remotely. This seems to be a paradox. If I want to move forward, I must take the corresponding risks. After hesitating for a moment, Chen Chen asked, "What is Lin Mingxian's attitude? What was the result of your previous communication?" "Unclear, but relatively credible." Bao Xiaomei answered decisively. "Lin Mingxian didn't seem willing to simply reach a cooperation agreement with us. He didn't put forward any specific demands, but it was clear that the benefits he hoped to gain were beyond our expectations. If we really want to talk, the negotiation cycle may be long. But this makes more sense, doesn't it?" Chen Chen nodded slightly, but did not answer immediately. "It is indeed reasonable. If I just expressed my intention and Lin Mingxian immediately climbed up the pole and showed an appearance of full cooperation, then there would be something fishy going on. After all, although Meng La is small, the interests carried by this land are still quite huge. Wanting Lin Mingxian to give up his position is nothing more than a fool's dream. The more he resisted, the more credible he seemed. But whether to meet or not, Chen Chen really couldn't make a decision right away. He had no intention of resolving the Meng La issue through negotiation, because he was originally there to train his troops. However, our troops are still being mobilized, equipment is still being prepared, and logistics need to be strengthened. A proper discussion will also help buy us time. Otherwise, given Lin Mingxian's current situation, with no hope from his side, it is not impossible for him to turn against his side and start a war ahead of time." Thinking of this, Chen Chen said, "Then let's meet. But not now. Let him wait. I will inform you of the meeting time and place in half an hour." "Clear." Bao Xiaomei didn't say much, but turned and left immediately. Her eyes swept over Xiaoyu. and there was a hint of imperceptible loss in her eyes. However, neither Chen Chen nor Xiaoyu had time to care about her emotions. After Bao Xiaomei left, the two immediately began to discuss the specific issues of this meeting. "Do we definitely have to meet? This is a necessary step." Xiaoyu frowned and continued. "However, security must be in place. You need to conduct a full body search on him and ensure that you meet in a perfect bunker. All surrounding signals must be blocked, and you must not take any foreseeable actions. Advertisement: let him wait at the meeting place for an hour. When half an hour has passed, you can go meet him. The matter itself is not complicated. Let's talk it out as soon as possible and leave as soon as possible." "Clear." Chen Chen nodded in agreement, and then asked, "Based on the principle of hypothesis, if he really came here with the intention of assassinating, what methods might he use?" Hearing Chen Chen's question, Xiaoyu thought for a moment and replied, "It is basically impossible to escape detection by conventional means. There is no chance of poisoning. According to Bao Xiaomei and your intelligence, they have very little time to prepare, and they cannot use more complex means. Maybe a suicide bomber? Do you have an X-ray?" "Yes, the Jackal gave me an X-ray security device." "Good comrade," Xiaoyu praised jokingly, and then continued. "Then the human bomb can also be ruled out. The most likely possibility is that the human body is infected with poison. If there really was an assassination, they would have received help from the CIA. It wouldn't be difficult to get some highly lethal virus. However, for a person to be infected, there must be physical contact because viruses that can be spread through the air are often not very lethal. Don't shake his hand. Just keep the air circulating." Chen Chen took Xiaoyu's words seriously and then asked, "Nothing else?" "I'm not sure, but it should be gone." Chen Chen nodded and said, "Then arrange it. I hope we are just overthinking it. Otherwise Lin Mingxian really thinks he has lived too long." A few minutes later, Chen Chen notified Li Bang to bring the people into the base and completed a series of security checks on the visitors according to Xiaoyu's request. During the security check, Bao Xiaomei also informed Chen Chen of further detailed information about the visitor. The person who came was called Lin Shuyue, a younger generation of Lin Mingxian's family. According to Bao Xiaomei, Lin Mingxian was very fond of this younger generation and had been training him as his right-hand man for quite a long time. Logically speaking, it is impossible for Lin Mingxian to use such a person as a killer, so the danger is further reduced. But even so, Xiaoyu and Chen Chen still did not relax their vigilance. They watched Lin Shuyue's every move in the security area through radio and surveillance cameras, and the personnel in charge of security also conveyed the results of the inspection to them through obvious movements and gestures. X-ray scan is fine, no weapons, no metal objects on him. Very clean. The disinfection has been completed. If there is a virus, it has most likely been killed. I stripped him for a search, took off his coat, and asked him to put on a shirt, etc. The nails and teeth are clean and look fine." Xiaoyu breathed a sigh of relief, nodded to Chen Chen, and then said, "Let him in, let him go to the office, tell him to wait for an hour, and then go and find him in 10 minutes. "No problem." Chen Chen immediately gave the order, and then Li Bang brought Lin Shuyue to Chen Chen's office. The wireless signal shielding device was turned on, and through the wired CCTV that was still working, Chen Chen could clearly see Lin Shuyue's movements. I have to say, he is really well behaved. He just sat quietly on the sofa, drinking tea and flipping through the newspaper beside him. He looked relaxed and acted like an envoy who really came to discuss business. After observing for 10 minutes, Xiaoyu finally gave the suggestion of approved. So Chen Chen immediately walked into the office. When his figure appeared at the door, Lin Shuyue stood up respectfully and said, "Commander Chen, I have heard a lot about you." He stretched out his hand to shake hands with Chen Chen, but Chen Chen waved his hand to motion for him to sit down. After maintaining a safe distance, Chen Chen sat behind his desk and asked, "Mr. Lin, what we need to discuss this time is very simple, so let's just cut to the chase. The negotiations we are about to have with you are of great importance and will be a long process. Therefore, I propose that both parties send key representatives to the absolutely neutral zone to complete the negotiations. The absolute neutral zone I'm talking about is Daoyuo. The venue is tentatively set to be the Fuguei Hotel in Daoyuo, and the time is 3 days from now. Can you make the final decision on this arrangement?" "Absolutely." A hint of joy appeared on Lin Shuyue's face, because he knew that Chen Chen's arrangement was actually more beneficial to Mengla. Daoyuo and Mengla are separated by a river, and it can even be said that it still belongs to Mengla's sphere of influence. Under such circumstances, Chen Chen's choice of Daoyuo as the location can basically be regarded as a sincere concession. He had absolutely no reason to refuse, and after getting his answer, Chen Chen immediately nodded and continued, "That's settled then. We have nothing else to discuss." "That's all." Lin Shuyue was stunned. He never thought that this mission would be so easy. He originally thought that even the question of location would have to be determined after a long discussion or even a fierce conflict. After all, this may lead to a Hongmen banquet problem. This is also the reason why he had to come here in person. He had come here in advance to clear minds. But now, the situation is completely different from what he thought. If I had known this would happen, why would I have come here? This sentence only has a few dozen words, and it can be said in 30 seconds on the phone. It seems that my boss has indeed misjudged the intention of the coalition forces. The other party seems to be really here for cooperation. Thinking of this, his eyes looking at Chen also changed a little, and Chen nodded and replied, "That's it. You can go now." "No problem, Commander Chen. See you next time." Lin Shuyue subconsciously extended his hand again. Chen still did not shake hands with him, but he did not feel offended. Instead, he nodded and said goodbye. Everything seemed so normal, as if Xiaoyu and Chen were just being neurotic. However, just after Lin Shuyue left, Xiaoyu suddenly frowned. "Clothing." She spoke. "He may not know it, but there may be something wrong with his clothes. There aren't many people in Pubei who wear suits and jackets, right? Who asked him to come in full formal attire? Control Lin Shuyue first and don't let him leave. Disinfect him thoroughly and quarantine all those who have just come into contact with him. The base has entered a state of emergency. All other personnel evacuate to the upwind area. I think it's most likely a toxin, but I don't know what it is. Did he take the suit jacket with him? Xiaoyu issued a series of orders, and Chen Chen did not question them. Instead, he carried out all the instructions exactly as she requested. The entire Dongfeng base entered an unprecedented tense situation, but no one knew why. Li Bang and several other security personnel were isolated. They took off all their clothes on the spot, sprayed their whole bodies with agricultural sprayers and peracetic acid for disinfection, and then flushed them with a large flow of fire hoses. Lin Shuwei himself was confined in a separate barracks with all doors and windows closed, and could only communicate with the outside world through a wired communication system. Not only Lin Shuwei, but even Li Bang felt puzzled by this. After completing all the disinfection, they were also isolated. On the phone, he asked Chen Chen, "Captain, what is going on? Isn't it just someone coming in? Why are you making such a fuss?" Hearing his question, Chen Chen shook his head subconsciously, and then replied, "I can't explain it to you." Now the professionals suspect that there is something wrong with Lin Shuwei's identity. Regardless of whether there is a problem or not, we must remain highly vigilant and eliminate the risks before making further plans. But we didn't feel anything wrong with our bodies. Is it because of the protective suit? Li Bang said in confusion. The suits definitely work, but it's possible that the toxins aren't fast-acting. Just wait, we've gone to the hospital to find more comprehensive isolation suits, and we'll have to do an inspection of the suits later. Xiaoyu suspects that the toxins may have been sprayed on the surface of the suits. Clear. Li Bang did not ask any more questions. He knew that everything could be discussed before Chen Chen made the final decision, but once he made the final decision, no one could question it anymore. At this time, the investigation of Lin Shuwei had already begun. Just as Chen Chen expected, he was completely unaware of the so-called assassination and had no idea about it at all. In this suspicion, he was completely innocent, and he even cooperated very well to prove his innocence. From receiving the order to setting off, he described every detail in great detail without concealing anything. The entire logic was completely self-consistent, and there were no flaws. According to him, the reason why he wore a suit jacket was actually very random. In the temperature of Pubei, it is certainly not necessary to wear a coat. However, considering the formality of this meeting, he still sought advice from Lin Mingxian, who thought it was a bit too formal and had not originally planned to let him wear it. It was only when they were about to set off that he suddenly felt that he should appear more respectful and asked someone to take him to change his clothes. He chose the clothes himself. He originally wanted to choose a set of light, thin, and breathable ones, but Lin Mingxian felt that no matter how thin the clothes were, he would still sweat, so it would be better to choose one with a fabric that was not easily wet and had better isolation properties. So he picked out a set of linen for himself. Apart from that, there is nothing suspicious. But from this series of confusing details, Xiaoyu separated out the key doubts. It doesn't matter whether his actions were reasonable or not, and it doesn't matter whether the logic of the whole incident is logical or not. Because any person with normal intelligence can make up a reasonable story. Reality is not a detective novel. There are not so many loopholes for you to catch. What you really need to pay attention to is only one factor: the result. The result is that Lin Shuwei really put on the suit, and just as we expected, there were signs of external force pushing him into the suit. Wait until the isolation suits arrive, and then we can find out what the problem is with this suit. Hearing Xiaoyu's words, Chen Chen nodded slowly, and then asked, "Are there any suspected toxins?" Anything is possible. Spraying a high concentration of ricin on a suit can achieve the effect of assassination, but this will inevitably sacrifice Lin Shuwei. In addition, there are many contact toxins or viruses that may also be used. However, OMS is very cautious in this regard. We don't have much intelligence, but one thing is certain. If the CIA wants to organize such an assassination, they are very convenient in obtaining the tools. OMS. Chen Chen looked puzzled. The CIA's medical support department. They are most famous for using truth serum and LSD. I see. Why is it easy for the CIA to obtain tools? Don't you know about the CIA's black cell in Thailand? No. In fact, the rumors about the black prison at the CIA base in Udon Thani province, Thailand, are like a postmodern version of an urban legend. In a series of rumors that Chen Chen had heard, this prison was described as a horrible hell. Legend has it that it was specially set up to interrogate suspects of terrorist and separatist activities, using a variety of cruel torture methods on a large scale and torturing every prisoner who entered this prison. Once you go in, there is no possibility of coming out. It is already a blessing to die quickly in there. But then again, since this is an urban legend, it means that it is not credible at all. In 2018, this legendary base was opened to the public and directly converted into a tourist attraction. There is indeed no trace of a prison inside it. Nonsense. The Americans are so bored that they build a prison in such a place? What's the point? In this case, why did Xiaoyu mention this detail? Seeing Chen Chen's confused eyes, Xiaoyu continued. Thailand's black jail is an exaggerated concept that is the product of conspiracy theories. It is a water monster that people invented after fishing out a few pieces of duckweed floating on the water. But people's imagination can only imagine water monsters, but they can never imagine that there are icebergs under the water of a pond. CIA operations in Southeast Asia go much deeper than you might imagine. As early as the Vietnam War, as the United States calls it, this region has become fertile ground for SciSat activity. Many research projects were placed here, and a large number of these projects were withdrawn after entering the 21st century. However, even if it is just a legacy left, it is enough to support their remaining forces to be active here. Who knows what they have hidden? Maybe there is a safe house hidden under an ordinary house. There may even be a small tactical nuclear bomb inside, not to mention the toxins commonly used by SciSat for assassination. I see. Chen Chen nodded thoughtfully, but suddenly his heart skipped a beat again. A safe house. There is a CIA safe house in Kingtong. Isn't Jingdong in your control area? It is in our control area, but... Chen Chen did not continue speaking, but immediately called He Bangxiong. After confirming it in a few words, Chen Chen received the news that he expected. The coalition forces' management focus is almost entirely on Dakali. Although Jingdong, the original important town, cannot be said to be a vacuum, control in all aspects has been downgraded. This is the disadvantage of being short of manpower. Or in fact, it can be said that no one in the coalition forces has the experience to manage such a vast territory. The loss of control over management has also led to a shift in the focus of management. The most typical manifestation is that the control of non-core points is seriously insufficient. Even the visible and hidden sentry posts originally deployed near the safe house have been withdrawn and replaced by periodic patrols. The safe house may have been pried open. Chen Chen ordered He Bangxiong to check immediately. He Bangxiong also realized the seriousness of the problem and promised Chen Chen that he would give him the results within 10 minutes. Advertisement. After hanging up the phone, Chen Chen looked at Xiao Yu and said, "We made a mistake. The safe house that was originally in our hands may have been pried away again. The things inside may have been lost." "Why?" Xiao Yu frowned in confusion and continued. "They have no reason to do this. This safe house is already under your control. Rather than taking the risk of getting something from it, it's better to transfer it from somewhere else. Unless there is," Xiao Yu's eyes suddenly changed. "Unless there is something in it that is difficult for them to obtain from other places and is irreplaceable." Chen Chen added in a low voice. "That's right. You must have your people open the safe house and check it immediately, no matter what the sensitivity is. Blow it up. No, you can't blow it up. There might be some biological or chemical weapons inside. This is the only thing that is irreplaceable. Let them go and check. It will be enough if they find evidence that the door was opened." "Understood. I've already told He Bangxiong." Chen Chen sighed and then said, "That's enough. If we had known, we should have gotten rid of this safe house sooner. I didn't expect their control to be so weak." Xiao Yu nodded without comment and said, "You should never count on the governing and management capabilities of these warlords. To be honest, it's already pretty good that they can achieve this level. Ultimately, it's our own problem. If we had known, we would have just blown it down. We were hoping that we could find a way to open it one day. We were too greedy and understaffed. This is a lesson learned." Hearing Xiao Yu's words, Chen Chen comforted her. "It's not anyone's fault. If we must investigate, we should have taken action directly at that time. All I can say is that the enemy is neither a fool nor a piece of wood. I hope it's empty." Xiao Yu's expression was a little solemn. Of course she knew it couldn't be empty, but things had developed to this point, and all the hindsight was meaningless. In the past 2 months, the situation has developed too quickly, and everyone has too many things to do. It is not surprising that mistakes have occurred. It would be strange if everything had gone smoothly. The two looked at each other, and a few minutes later, Chen Chen received feedback from He Bangxiong. The second-floor security door of the safe house was opened, and there were obvious marks on the ground. This means that Siasad has indeed begun operations in Pubei and has taken away irreplaceable equipment from the safe house closest to them. However, the Dongfeng Corps still could not enter the safe house, nor could they obtain more detailed information. Chen Chen could only order He Bangxiong to break through from the side at all costs. At this point, they no longer have to consider any so-called sensitivity and danger, nor do they need to consider maintaining the integrity of the safe house. What they needed was to get into the safe house as quickly as possible and find out what was inside. This would take a long time, but fortunately, the isolation suits from the hospital also arrived at this time. Chen Chen arranged for Li Bang, who had come into contact with Lin Shuwei, to put on an isolation suit and stored the suit in a special sealed storage bag. He then disinfected the storage bag and sent it outside. Xiao Yu did not delay any further, but arranged for someone to take the clothes to Daoyuo, preparing to return to Yunnan to test the clothes. However, this process was actually no longer necessary. Lin Shuwei began to show mild but obvious poisoning reactions. Under such tense circumstances, he actually fell asleep in the barracks where he was imprisoned. Chen Chen had no way of examining him further, and the medical staff had no way of getting close. But soon he began to have more physiological reactions. His muscles gradually relaxed and became weak, and he seemed to be trying very hard to support his body, but he fell heavily to the ground again. At the same time, he also experienced dry heaves, loss of balance, and even obvious difficulty breathing. He is about to die. This was truly an assassination, and this assassination, which came without any signs, was actually blocked by Xiao Yu. Typical neurotoxin, poisoning symptoms. It looks a bit like tetrodotoxin, but it shouldn't be. This is clearly a skin contact toxin, VX, or something like Novichok. Xiao Yu's words sounded more like mumbling to herself. Chen Chen didn't know much about this. He was just worried about Li Bang's situation. Are my people okay? I don't know. We have to wait and see the results of subsequent analysis. But there has been no reaction so far, so basically it's fine. They all wore gloves and were quickly disinfected and showered. In theory, there shouldn't be any major problems. It's actually poisonous. To be honest, I didn't expect this to be an assassination. What's the meaning? Chen Chen asked in amazement. I just want to treat this handling as a drill to raise your vigilance. I didn't expect to encounter the real thing during the first rehearsal. The situation is more serious than we expected. You must be prepared. The enemy won't give us any time to react. I see. Chen Chen took a deep breath and continued. We can't just sit there and wait for death. If we don't act, the enemy will always have opportunities. They have to move and can't just stay in the area where they are good at. You should go back to the north first, or to Dakali. I can't wait any longer. Tonight, I will ask Lin Mingxian to give an answer. If you can't explain today's events clearly, I will officially declare war on him starting tomorrow. Although he said that he wanted Lin Mingxian to give an answer, Chen Chen did not waste his time arguing with the other party, but directly handed the task to Bao Xiaomei. Because for him, from the moment Lin Shuwei showed symptoms of poisoning, all room for mediation had disappeared. There must be a battle between us and Meng La, and the result must be the surrender or complete destruction of all of Meng La's armed forces. The reason is very simple. It is impossible that Lin Mingxian was completely unaware of the assassination. According to Xiao Yu's analysis, the toxic substance they used does not look like any of the currently known toxic substances. So it is obvious that this poisoning must have been prepared over a long period of time. As long as he is prepared, can Lin Mingxian stay out of it? Stop joking. Therefore, Chen Chen quickly completed the initial communication with the coalition forces and mobilized the troops that were going to participate in the war. Since the target of this attack was Ximengla, they did not need to do much preparation. Only half an hour later, He Bangxiong responded that the troops were about to set off. At the same time, He Bupa also rushed to Mengka in person to prepare to command the troops stationed there. All members of the Dongfeng Corps entered a state of war, the team members were ready to go, and the armored units were all ready. Chung Lei also conducted a final inspection of the Mi-171SH and completed the ammunition status and weapon preparation. Next, as soon as Bao Xiaomei and Lin Mingxian finished their communication, the Dongfeng Corps could immediately break camp and prepare for war. In Chen Chen's opinion, there won't be any fancy strategies in this battle. What he had to do was to send a large army to the border and launch an attack directly on the 911th Division of the Mengla Army stationed in Namban and the Central Independent Brigade of Mengla. After they were all connected, he would intercept the 369th Division from Sealer in the northwest. After annihilating or dispersing them all, he would be able to annihilate the Mengla Army. Given the quality of the Mengla Army, it is unlikely that guerrilla tactics will appear. In addition to the particularity of this special zone, most of the economic center is concentrated in the Mengla urban area. Taking over Mengla is actually equivalent to taking over the Mengla Army. The tasks are linear and simple and do not require much deduction. After the war begins, just combine battlefield firepower reconnaissance and push forward. What he needs to worry about now is the situation of Li Bang and his men. 2 hours had passed since Lin Shu fell ill, and they still had no symptoms, but that didn't mean they were completely safe. We have to wait until the test results from Xiaoyu are sent back before we can draw a final conclusion. Chen Chen was very nervous. This feeling was different from going to the battlefield. Some people say that the most painful way to die in the world is paraquat poisoning. You clearly don't feel anything yet, but death is already standing in front of you. Obviously, Chen Chen's current mood is similar. The only difference might be that he doesn't know whether there is a wall there or not. He looked at the surveillance footage with a little anxiety. At this moment in the barracks, Lin Shuyue's condition had begun to deteriorate rapidly. Sweating all over, drooling, numbness, cramps, rapid breathing, vomiting. Chen Chen watched him die. Finally, 2 hours and 40 minutes after the poison took effect, Lin Shuyue stopped breathing completely. This was definitely one of the most helpless deaths Chen Chen had ever seen. The floor of the barracks had been scratched with blood marks by Lin Shuyue. In the last moments of his life, he seemed to feel that this barracks was too stifling, so he tried to crawl to the window and smash the glass with his fists. But unfortunately, his cramped muscles no longer allowed him to do so. Finally, he fell under the window, staring outside. Even through the surveillance, Chen Chen felt his hair stand on end. He almost subconsciously looked at the surveillance of the room where Li Bang and his group were, but fortunately, they behaved very normally. Some of them even took out playing cards from the drawer and started playing landlord. He breathed a sigh of relief, turned to Xiaoyu and asked, "They should be basically fine, right?" Xiaoyu shook her head and replied, "The toxin is obviously attached to the suit." Lin Shuyue was exposed to the toxin for much longer than them. According to the itinerary, it must have been at least 4 hours longer. It's only been a little over 3 hours now. It will take at least another hour to fully confirm that they are safe. But I personally think they should be fine. Why? Chen Chen asked. Because Lin Shuyue's reaction to the poisoning was very strange. It has the characteristics of both V-type and G-type poisons, but the onset period is different. This should be a mixture of poisons. To be honest, it looks more like something else. What? TMH? TMH? Developer? Can this thing be poisonous? Chen Chen asked in surprise. Xiaoyu was even more surprised than him, because she didn't expect that Chen Chen actually knew what TMH was. However, Xiaoyu did not ask too many questions and just explained. I just said it's like TMH. It feels like it works in the same way as TMH, antagonizing cholinergic receptors to cause muscle paralysis and ultimately leading to respiratory failure and death. But how exactly is it? Wait, the results are out. Just then, Xiaoyu's phone rang. She picked up the phone, listened to a few words and hung up. Then she continued to say to Chen Chen, "It's pretty much what I guessed. It's definitely related to G and V poisons. But it's a little more complicated. This is a mixed poison, GV type, EA 5365 or EA 5414 EA 5488. We have very little intelligence, and the analysis is very rough in a short period of time, but there is no doubt that this thing is indeed an IVA agent, intermediately volatile agent. You are really lucky, you know, we overlooked an important detail." "What details?" "Lin Shuyue came here in an open jeep, right?" Chen Chen's heart skipped a beat, and then he suddenly realized that this was actually the biggest flaw. Wearing a suit and tie, he didn't take a luxury car, but a jeep. There is no doubt that this is to prevent the IVA poison on the suit from evaporating prematurely and forming steam accumulation, so as to kill Lin Shuyue before he enters his office. The other party's plan was so thorough that it almost frightened Chen Chen. If Xiaoyu hadn't been there, how would things have gone? He would have let Lin Shuyue in after careful consideration. Li Bang and the others would have searched him without any preparation and would have been corroded by the toxin the moment they touched the suit, eventually dying in agony. And he would have a face-to-face meeting with Lin Shuyue in a confined space, inhaling a large amount of volatile toxic vapors. Even if he was lucky enough not to die, he would definitely lose the ability to move independently. Just as Xiaoyu said, "In the end, I might not even know how I died." There is indeed a master behind Lin Mingxian. This kind of tactics are not something that the rustic warlords in Pubei can resort to. Thinking of this, Chen Chen's expression became somewhat fierce. "I have to get rid of Lin Mingxian. He's not coming for me alone. He can use nerve toxins this time, but next time he will definitely dare to throw an anthrax bomb at me. I have to inform you in advance that he won't survive." "I know." Advertisement Xiaoyu nodded immediately and then said, "This level of poison appeared in Pubei. Saisad really risked everything. We now have evidence in our hands. Once it is released, it will be extremely disadvantageous to them. They should have been prepared. I was wondering why when I was in Indonesia, I always felt that the CIA's involvement was not high. They are separated from the military. The military's fight with you in Indonesia bought them time to prepare in Pubay. Chen Chen nodded slowly. In this case, everything makes sense. So, their preparations definitely cannot be just a small matter of assassination. Lin Mingxian has contact with the Kachins, so it is impossible that he found the Kachins, but the Kachins found him. The fact that Kachin was able to find him means that Kachin had already made preparations for the war. What exactly were they promised? Equipment? Personnel? It can't be just political support, right? It's probably equipment. Xiaoyu also looked heavy-hearted. After thinking for a few seconds, she said, we need to check the route from India to Bangladesh. Maybe it has become a smuggling channel for Kachin. But no matter what, you have to change your strategy. You are not just facing the Kachin, you are facing the CIA directly. It's strange that the CIA has the spare capacity to make such a large-scale deployment in Southeast Asia when the Syrian issue is still brewing. It's none of my business. Chen Chen interrupted Xiaoyu and said, I don't know what the CIA is doing in Syria, and I don't care. But I know they must have done something in Southeast Asia. The various difficulties we encountered before were just tests. At least the Thai and Myanmar sides are connected with them. I want a position where neither Myanmar nor Thailand can interfere. Please do me a favor and issue a wanted order for Lin Mingxian. The sooner the better. Meanwhile, Mengla. In the office, Lin Mingxian had just finished a call with Bao Xiaomei, and the news the other party brought made him extremely disappointed. The assassination plan against the sunken ship was seen through. The person sent there did see the other party, but failed to complete his mission. How could this be possible? The plan was so complete and thorough that when Gan Mao told him about it, he was shocked. But why would such a plan that had surpassed his cognitive limits fail in front of the other party? No, not only did the plan fail, they even had sufficient evidence. From Bao Xiaomei's questioning just now, she could clearly feel that the other party knew the entire process of the assassination very well. If it wasn't Gan Mao who planned this action, but his boss behind him, he would have suspected that it was an insider who leaked the information. Thinking of this, he looked up at Gan Mao opposite him and asked, what should we do now? We have no room for maneuver. Although the Bao family is only questioning me and asking me to give an explanation, you can also see that this is just a formality. They have already regarded me as an enemy, and it won't be long before they launch a direct attack. We are not ready yet. Even the weapons you promised us have not arrived yet. I don't want to go to war with the coalition. At least not now. Hearing his words, Gan Mao shook his head helplessly and replied, this is indeed a low probability event. I can only say that they are too lucky. But it doesn't matter. Assassination and beheading can only serve as icing on the cake. The real winner is the frontal battlefield. We have no choice but to go to war as soon as possible. It will take time for the other side to mobilize their troops. Their main force is still in Dakali. And in Mungka, they only have less than 500 troops. Press forward, destroy Mungka, and control the central transportation line. As long as we cut off the connection between Wa State and Shan State, we will have a chance. Hold on for 2 days, just 2 days. We will attack from the west. And Wa won't be able to withstand it. Are you sure it will only take 2 days? Lin Mingxian asked doubtfully. As a local warlord, he has a very deep understanding of his own kind of people and forces. Under normal circumstances, if you want to organize a large-scale battle, it would probably take not even 2 weeks, let alone 2 days. In addition, Gan Mao's originally confident assassination plan failed, so he really couldn't trust the other party without reservation anymore. However, after seeing Lin Mingxian's expression, Gan Mao nodded very firmly. Believe me, we are fully prepared. Until then, we're just biding our time. We would have liked to have had a better chance to build a bigger advantage for us. But now that the situation has developed to this point, there is no need for us to hesitate any longer. Fight now. Mobilize your troops as quickly as possible and charge straight ahead. You have 5,000 men, and the troops in Namban also have 2,000. I think that's enough, 2,000 versus 500. Don't you fucking say that shit to me. Lin Mingxian suddenly became furious. He slammed the table, then stood up and pointed at Gan Mao and said, 2,000 versus 500? Who do you think they are? Some worthless bandits. They are the Dongfeng Corps. They have 4 tanks and more than a dozen armored vehicles. Even without these things, our 2,000 men may not be able to defeat them. You've already made a mistake once, and now you want me to make it again? I'm telling you, I won't attack. I'll wait here. I'll hold out for 2 days. If you still don't take action in 2 days, I will surrender immediately. Gan Mao looked at Lin Mingxian in astonishment. After a few seconds of silence, he said, okay, just 2 days. Don't worry, the Dongfeng Corps is not a god. They can't defeat us. The coalition forces in the direction of Dakali have begun large-scale mobilization. But in fact, Chen Chen has no intention of relying on this team at all. It was not because he was arrogant and thought that he could defeat Lin Mingxian's Mengla army with just a few hundred militiamen and a few tanks and armored vehicles. On the contrary, it was because he knew that the Mengla army was not so easy to deal with. So he had to seize the fleeting opportunity and quickly eliminate their threat. In the combat command room, Chen Chen summoned all corps members to discuss the upcoming combat operations. Facing the simple map hanging on the wall, Chen Chen said, the Mongla army stationed in Namban is their 911th division. Although it is called a division and claims to have 2,000 soldiers in service, they actually only have about 1,000 standing troops. The other 1,000 are like the Kokong Allied Army, a half-farmer, half-soldier militia. Their weapons are mainly light weapons, to put it bluntly, rifles, light machine guns, and a small number of heavy machine guns. In terms of explosives, they have a small number of various types of rocket launchers, a small number of grenades and landmines. Generally speaking, this team's equipment is outdated, its personnel are poorly trained, and they basically don't have the ability to confront us head-on. However, Myanmar village, 10 kilometers away from Namban, is the headquarters of the Mengla Army Central Independent Brigade. This brigade has 1,000 professional soldiers, equipped with 4 armored vehicles, more than a dozen small-caliber artillery pieces, dozens of mortars, and a large number of individual rocket launchers and explosives. If we launch an attack on Namban, the Central Independent Brigade will be able to respond and join the battle within 20 minutes. According to the range of their artillery, they can set up artillery positions near the Jingdong Temple and fire directly at us. The artillery deployment time is less than 20 minutes. That means we only have 35 minutes at most to resolve the battle at Namban battlefield. We must disperse and defeat the enemy within 35 minutes of contact, and after leaving behind defensive forces, rely on the mobility of the armored forces to quickly advance to Jingdong Temple, destroy the enemy's artillery positions, and establish our own mortar positions here. Afterwards, we need to adopt infantry tank coordinated tactics and launch a full-scale attack on the Central Independent Brigade in Myanmar with the support of helicopters. Our goal is to destroy all their armored forces before they can react and cut off their retreat to Myanmar. This is a goal that must be achieved because we cannot allow fighting to take place near Mongla or Daluo. After completing the encirclement and suppression of the Central Independent Brigade, we must quickly turn west to meet the 369th Division coming from the northwest. They may continue to fight, or they may surrender directly, but no matter what their choice is, we must completely disarm them. Our time is very tight, because we can't let the other 3 teams complete the convergence. That would fundamentally change the balance of power in the region, and we would have to spend more time and invest more costs. So to sum up, the key to this combat mission is just one word: fast. Everyone must obey orders, be clear about their positions, and maintain good combat formation to ensure high efficiency of the operation. Remember, defeating them is not our goal. Defeat them in the fastest and safest way. It is now 1900 hours. We will officially start the operation at 2400 hours and expect to finish the battle before 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Do you understand? Clear. Everyone in the team answered at the same time. Chen Chen nodded with satisfaction, and without saying anything more, he immediately announced the disbandment and asked each team leader to return to make final preparations. At this time, Li Bang and his men had completed another shower disinfection. After confirming that they were not affected, they returned to the team smoothly. Standing next to Chen Chen, Li Bang rubbed his blistered palms impatiently, and then said, "This operation was a bit too hasty. We didn't have time to conduct any detailed reconnaissance. All the intelligence we had was ready-made intelligence we had previously acquired. We didn't even know the specific deployment of the enemy's forces. Will this be a problem? What if they have already prepared in advance and are waiting for us to attack?" Hearing his words, Chen Chen shook his head and replied, "It doesn't matter. Advertisement, the battlefield is not static, and even the process of reconnaissance, combat, and cleanup is not static. The strength of the Myanmar army is too weak. Unlike Dakali, they don't even have the dangerous terrain and broad depth. Even, of the 5,000 soldiers they claim to have, the number of bulletproof vests does not exceed 200. Under such circumstances, if we still follow the procedures step by step, we will miss the opportunity. You know, the Kachin are watching us, and the CIA is watching us too. If we give them more time, they might actually pick up the anti-tank missiles in the bushes. It's best to attack with all your strength. You have to learn to adapt to changing circumstances." Clear. Li Bang nodded solemnly, and then continued to ask, "What about Lin Mingxian? Should we organize a decapitation operation at the same time?" "Not necessary for now." Chen Chen shook his head again. "Lin Mingxian is not paying Kaxing, and certainly not Pao Yaoxiang. His authority is not historical, although I really want to get rid of him. In reality, whether he lives or dies has no impact on the overall situation. As long as we defeat the main force of the Myanmar army, everything will be over. As for whether we should search for Lin Mingxian again after we occupy Myanmar, that's a matter for later. We don't need to consider it now. Okay, go out and get ready. This time, you will be responsible for commanding 4 infantry teams. Don't let me down." Clear. Li Bang answered loudly and turned to leave. At this time, at the Dongfeng Corps base, all pre-war preparations had been rapidly carried out. 4 tanks and 4 armored vehicles were lined up. In addition to the Dongfeng Corps' own vehicles, 2 SH-3s belonging to the coalition forces had also arrived. Mechanics were filling the tanks with fuel. The wings of the Mi-171SH began to rotate. The rocket nests were filled with rockets, and the machine gun ammunition belts were all full. The AH-2 is hooked onto a truck and can be quickly unhooked to complete deployment after arriving at the designated location. As for other light equipment, they are already lined up in an open field, waiting to be loaded. 205mm caliber M56 mountain howitzers, 407mm rocket launchers, 12 rain-enhancing rocket launchers, 6 60mm mortars, and 1 120mm mortar. These were originally considered quite advanced equipment by the Dongfeng Corps, but most of them can no longer be used by the Dongfeng Corps itself. It's not because we don't like it, but because we are really short of manpower. He Bupa will personally lead his own soldiers to operate these weapons and provide necessary intermediate fire support for the Dongfeng Corps. Finally, there are the infantrymen wearing heavy bulletproof vests and holding advanced sights. There is only one word to describe this team in Pubei. That is luxury. What kind of enemy could withstand the full force of this team? Chen Chen didn't know, and Lin Mingxian didn't know either, or he didn't have time to think about it. Because at this time, in order to boost the morale of his men, he had already personally rushed to the vicinity of Namban. He and the grassroots militiamen were digging temporary trenches with hoes, carrying Type 81 rifles with worn-out rifling and swinging hose in the slightly hot evening breeze. The straight-line distance between Mungka Base and Namban is 50 kilometers, and the total road mileage is 60 kilometers. According to the marching speed of motorized troops, it would only take 1 hour and 30 minutes at most for the coalition forces departing from Mungka to reach the front line of the battlefield. Taking into account the time required for the deployment of the troops, the Dongfeng Corps completed all preparations at 2200 hours and set out. But in fact, just after 8 o'clock, Li Bang had already led the reconnaissance team to Namban in advance, occupied the commanding heights on the east side, and establish comprehensive surveillance of the Namban camp. At this time, Chen Chen, who was sitting in the temporarily dispatched warrior command vehicle, was monitoring the intelligence coming from Li Bang. Every piece of news he heard made him lower his evaluation of the Mengla army. The enemy is organizing trench digging. They have cut off the Mengla road on the south side of Namban and laid a small number of mines along the road. Judging from its size, it should be an anti-personnel mine. 4 teams were scattered on both sides of the road. They had anti-tank rocket launchers similar to RPG-29, but not in large numbers. I can see their position perfectly. We can destroy their ambush positions first. Now reporting the location of the enemy's anti-tank position. The coordinates are the trench has been basically dug. The depth is very shallow, about 1.2 meters, only up to the waist. There are 3 trenches in total, running east-west, with a length of no more than 600 meters. The infantry has begun to enter the trenches, and the personnel are arranged in a very dense formation. I have identified the enemy's high-value firepower point and will now report the location and reference information. The deployment of the Mengla army's positions was passed to Chen Chen without omission. He kept making notes on the battle map. At this moment, he felt the importance of the central command system extremely urgently. If he had the same thing as the one used by MPRI in the last fight, he could now synchronize all enemy information to the PDAs of all combat units through data links, dispel all battlefield fog, and make his own operations a one-sided and transparent situation. Of course, he can now roughly complete similar work. Through the rough maps distributed in advance, he has divided the designated battle zone into different blocks. By identifying the blocks, each combat unit can also quickly locate the position of high-value targets. Although the accuracy and efficiency were reduced, at least he could give quick commands through names such as D1 and B2 instead of using general terms and landmarks. This alone was enough to completely defeat the Mengla army. In modern warfare, information is the key. Not to mention more basic things like equipment information and personnel information, the position alone is enough to bring unparalleled advantages. Chen Chen even felt that in the case of complete information crushing, even if his side did not have heavy equipment, he could still use flexible guerrilla tactics to slowly bite off the Mengla army. At this time, the main force of the Dongfeng Corps was approaching the first key point, which was Taping, where conflicts had occurred many times before. This should have been the main traffic route between Mengla, Mengka, and Jingdong. If Chen Chen was the commander-in-chief of the Mengla army, he would definitely capture this point at all costs, control the waterway, and rely on the waterway to cut off the traffic lines, blocking attacks from all sides as much as possible and delaying the battle as long as possible. But it is obvious that Lin Mingxian is really not good at fighting and has no concept of the so-called strategic depth. The large force did not encounter any obstacles here, and the assault boat that Chen Chen had deployed in advance was completely useless. However, Chen Chen did not withdraw it. Instead, after careful consideration, he transferred an infantry company of the 7th Brigade that was originally planned to be deployed here, leaving only 2 infantry platoons and a Dongfeng Corps combat team to rely on the assault boats for defense and establish artillery positions. All other troops were transferred to Namban. In fact, such an operation can be said to be a taboo in military strategy. The defense on the logistics line was seriously inadequate, and the key artillery positions were extremely empty. If an assault team from Mengla bypassed the main road and launched an attack on the Taping artillery position through the jungle, the side would face the danger of a fire in the backyard. But Chen Chen was very confident. He believed that with Lin Mingxian's command ability and the combat effectiveness of the Mengla army, such a thing would not happen. What's more, only 1 AH-2 needs to be deployed here, so there is no need to involve too much manpower. The troops continued to advance, and the journey was still smooth. At this time, the Mengla army should have noticed the movements of the Dongfeng Corps. After all, if the communication could not be completely cut off, they only needed to run farther away and use their mobile phones to call Lin Mingxian to pass the information. However, the Dongfeng Corps did not suffer any harassment, which made Chen Chen feel incredible. He ordered the main force to stop advancing and sent tanks and Dongfeng Corps vanguards to conduct reconnaissance and clear obstacles. At this time, they were still 8 kilometers away from Namban. The 2nd artillery position was quickly deployed, and intermediate firepower equipment including SH-3, M56 howitzers, and 107 rockets were deployed. 200 soldiers from the 7th Brigade stayed here to cooperate with the 2 Dongfeng Corps combat teams, responsible for operating equipment and defending positions. In the distance, the lights of the Namban position were faintly visible. Chen Chen sat in the command vehicle as still as a mountain, constantly issuing new orders. Dongfeng Group 2 lead the engineering troops forward, using the armored units as cover, and quickly occupy the advantageous terrain on both sides of the road. The mines planted by the enemy are concentrated along the Mengla Highway, 2 kilometers away from the Namban position. Be prepared to use rain-enhancing rockets for preliminary mine clearance upon receiving the order. Dongfeng Groups 3 and 4 will cooperate with the 7th Brigade to clean up the villages along the route and establish a control zone. Tanks 1 and 2 continue to move forward to provide fire suppression for the engineers and create a mine clearance window. Tanks 3 and 4 will advance in the direction of the main attack, bypassing the damaged road area to the western farmland, and attack the enemy positions from west to east. Artillery vehicles 1 and 2 continue to suppress the enemy positions and create conditions for an assault. 4 kilometers from the battle zone, get ready, clear. Responses from various combat units came over the radio, and then, except for the roar of the engines, the team fell into silence again. In fact, considering their size, a march of this magnitude would not have been smooth sailing, but it seemed that Lin Mingxian was determined to retreat to the end. Even though Chen Chen had tried to give him a chance and tried to lure the enemy into battle, he simply refused to take the challenge. It was only 1 kilometer away from the outermost anti-tank position of the Mengla army and 2.5 kilometers away from the main position. The battle was about to break out, but before the first shot was fired, the night was still extremely quiet. At this time, on the Namban position of the Mengla army, Lin Mingxian was sitting in the temporary combat command post with an undisguised look of dejection on his face. He never expected that things would develop so quickly. Just 2 days ago, he was getting along in complete harmony with the Dongfeng Corps and the Allied forces, but 2 days later, the other side had already arrived in large numbers. What went wrong? Was it really just because of that one assassination? Or was the fate of both parties already determined? Yes, it must be like this. Otherwise, how could the enemy organize such a large-scale attack in such a short time? Their speed was so fast that they didn't even have time to prepare their positions, and even the trenches were dug in a hurry. Thinking of this, Lin Mingxian subconsciously rubbed his sore arm. He was just doing it for show and to boost morale. But as he dug, he became more and more excited, because he suddenly realized that every hole he dug would play a role in the subsequent battle. Although the effect may be minimal, what can we do? The promised aid to Cachin was not going to arrive in the short term, and their territory was surrounded by the coalition forces, leaving them with no way to obtain additional equipment. In this situation, even if there is the slightest advantage, one has to try his best to hold on to it. Of course, his performance was not completely meaningless. At least, the morale of the Myanmar army has really improved a lot. After seeing their top commander personally leading the way in digging trenches and preparing for battle, and after listening to his passionate speech, the nearly 2,000 militiamen of the 911th Division were full of fighting spirit. Advertisement, especially after hearing Lin Mingxian's promise that everyone could receive at least 10,000 renminbi in bonus after the war, they couldn't wait to start fighting. Because according to Lin Mingxian, although the opponent has superior equipment, they only have 500 people. As long as we get rid of their armored vehicles and make full use of the jungle and farmland terrain, it will not be difficult to defeat them. It would be great if that were true. Lin Mingxian sighed, looked at the adjutant beside him, and said thoughtfully, maybe we shouldn't go to war with them. No matter how you think about it, we have no advantage. We are surrounded geographically, suppressed in terms of equipment, and even less in terms of combat effectiveness. We should be good vassals and earn our money honestly. Sir, this is impossible. The adjutant interrupted Lin Mingxian, which was rare, and then continued. There's no way they'll let us exist. The fundamental reason why the Dongfeng Corps wanted to go to war with us was not assassination or hostile action, but simply because of Mongla. They cannot tolerate a special zone on their territory, and they are even more resolute than the Burmese army on this point. Moreover, the Myanmar military needs to consider the so-called international influence, but they don't. There will be a war between us, sooner or later. At least we still have the support of the Kachin people. If we can hold on for 2 days, maybe everything will turn around. Hearing the adjutant's words, Lin Mingxian nodded heavily. Come to think of it, he really had no other choice. So he had no choice but to ask, where is the enemy now? How is the troop deployment? They have arrived near the gas station, 3 kilometers away from Namban. As for the military strength, the adjutant frowned and thought for a moment, then continued, it's very strange. According to the information we obtained from our reconnaissance, the number of troops they brought here is very small. There seem to be less than 200 infantrymen and 6 armored vehicles and tanks. With such a small force, they want to defeat us? I find that a little unlikely. If we can get rid of their armored vehicles at all costs, won't their operation be declared a failure? 200 people? Lin Mingxian was shocked and then asked impatiently, are there really only 200 people? Yes, that's the number. They seem to have deployed their forces in the rear, in the artillery positions. That's great. Lin Mingxian became excited instantly. In this gloomy situation, he finally saw a glimmer of hope. No, it was not because he underestimated the Dongfeng Corps, but because of the strength of the Dongfeng Corps, he needed such an opportunity even more. The enemy always makes mistakes, and this time, the Dongfeng Corps made a huge mistake. How could this be possible? How could they not devote all their manpower to the battle for the position, but instead deploy their forces in the rear? One of my trenches is 600 meters long. Even if you have artillery, how many artillery do you need to fill my trenches? You know, in that famous war, even if the US military had as much ammunition as Van Fleet, they still couldn't take the positions controlled by the light infantry. Do you think you were stronger than the Americans now? This is obviously impossible. They underestimated us, Lin Mingxian said with great joy. They think that with a round of indiscriminate bombardment, our people will collapse, just like what happened in Dakali. But they don't know that we can give much more money than Zhao Jiaoyang. 10,000 is not enough. I can give you 20,000. Even if I lose everything, I will get through it. Give out money, 2,000 to each person first. Notify them, as long as we can stop them from Mengla in this battle. Each person who survives will receive 20,000, and each person who dies will receive 50,000. Kill one person and get an extra 5,000. Everyone who destroys an armored vehicle will receive 200,000 yuan, and everyone who destroys a tank will receive 500,000 yuan. A big reward will always bring about bravery. I just don't believe it. Do you think they can defeat us with just 200 people? Not to mention, most of these 200 people are militiamen from the 7th Brigade. How can they be stronger than us? Hit me hard, clear. The adjutant immediately stood at attention and saluted Lin Mingxian. Lin Mingxian breathed a sigh of relief and walked out of the temporary command post. At this time, most of the lights on the position had been turned off, with only a few searchlights shining towards the road ahead, making everything outside the position visible. The militiamen had already clenched their guns, and the bullets were already loaded. Without exception, their faces were filled with greed, and even the fear of facing a powerful enemy had been suppressed. The battle was imminent, and just when everyone's emotions reached their peak, a strong burst of fire suddenly exploded in the distance. Then, countless fire rains fell. However, those fire rains did not fall on the battlefield, but on the road. Boom, boom, boom. The explosions continued, but from the perspective of the Mengla army, it seemed a little funny. Seeing this scene, someone shouted excitedly, They missed! They missed! The first round of rain-enhancing bombs has been launched, and the main channel has been established. Heavy machine guns to shoot down their searchlights. Tank number 1 and number 2 move forward along the passage to establish a control area and assist the engineers in continuing to clear mines. Artillery preparation. Organize artillery bombardment on the enemy's anti-tank positions according to the predetermined points. Firebird, prepare for attack, search for high-value targets, and conduct precision cleanup. Infantry, prepare to deploy. Countdown 180 seconds. Chen Chen issued orders one after another, and after receiving the orders, all combat units took quick action. 2 tanks moved forward quickly, their tracks rolling over the road that had been riddled with holes by rain-enhancing rockets, guiding the infantry to deploy to both sides in a double-arrow attack formation and establish an attack starting position on the undulating terrain. The 12.7mm anti-aircraft machine guns fired crazily at the anti-tank positions 1 kilometer away, while the 7.62mm coaxial machine guns fired continuously, blocking the enemy infantry's route along the narrow passage. In the distant jungle, the anti-tank infantry that had been dispersed and preparing for close assault were completely suppressed. At this moment, the oppressive power of the modern main battle tank was fully revealed. Just 2 tanks were like a magic needle that firmly controlled the rhythm of the battle. No one can organize an effective attack under its firepower, because you can never bet that your rocket can hit the tank at a super long distance, and the enemy's bullets can't catch up with you. The infantry can only wait, and only consider launching an assault after the tank enters the so-called stable killing range. But, on the battlefield, we'll give you time to breathe. Just a dozen seconds after the tanks open fire, the small caliber artillery positions open fire first. A large number of mortar shells, 105mm grenades, and 107 rockets poured down, completely covering the area with a radius of 200 meters around the enemy's anti-tank positions. Boom! The explosions continued for half a minute. And within this half minute, the Dongfeng Corps had already begun the next phase of operations. The AH-2 155mm artillery far away and taping had completed the calculation of all elements, and the grenade traveled a distance of 17 kilometers and landed accurately in the woods. The shock wave swept across the entire forest, raising huge smoke and countless debris. These high-speed flying debris scattered like bullets, carrying terrifying impact force and blasted fiercely into the fragile flesh and blood. In the woods, the anti-tank infantrymen of the Myanmar army who were lying on the ground were terrified. They watched helplessly as their companions were thrown backwards by the shock wave of the explosion, and after hitting the tree trunks, their bodies were twisted at a strange angle. Even closer to the center of the explosion, someone was about to stand up and run away when a heavy mortar shell exploded right in front of him. In the firelight, his clothes suddenly disappeared, as if he had always come here naked. Then, the violently compressed flesh suddenly exploded, and the rotten flesh sprayed backwards, dyeing the entire fan-shaped area red. This horrifying scene shocked the crowd who were originally full of confidence. They even forgot to escape and just lay on the ground, waiting for the shelling to pass. And this is exactly the opportunity that the Dongfeng Corps wants. While the artillery began its bombardment, the engineers had already cleared both sides of the road with the help of blasting cords. 2 narrow passages were opened up at an angle to the road. 2 6-man infantry teams of the Dongfeng Corps pressed along the passages toward the anti-tank positions and stopped 100 meters away, waiting for the 5-second countdown of shelling stop from the radio before quickly moving forward. The great role of thermal imaging equipment in the jungle was once again demonstrated. 12 HK-416s spewed out dense bullets, wiping out all the enemies in the jungle. It took only 1 minute to clear all the enemies in the anti-tank position, that no one was injured. Although the anti-tank infantry, who were forced into a desperate situation, desperately pulled the trigger of the rocket launcher at the Dongfeng Corps' vanguard who was close at hand, the rocket did not hit anyone, but exploded dozens of meters behind the vanguard. The team members led by Lin He and by Go did not stop at all. After completing the clearing of the anti-tank position, they quickly returned to the team and formed a coordinated infantry tank formation with the 2 tanks again. They certainly did not follow closely behind the tanks and use them as cover as depicted in the movies. On the contrary, they kept as much distance as possible from the tanks, following them along the edge of the jungle as the tanks moved along the road. Looking down from the air, the tanks and infantry seem to be out of touch, but in fact, the cooperation between the infantry and tanks is extremely tacit. The tanks continued to break through in depth, shaking the enemy's defensive positions. On the radio, the infantry team with a broad field of vision constantly guides the tanks to high-value targets, using tracer bullets fired from general-purpose machine guns to mark the tank's attack directions. Whenever the laser-like line of fire pointed to a position, the tank's turret would turn accordingly and accurately launch 125mm high-explosive bombs onto the position. In a very short period of time, the 2 tanks destroyed 4 heavy machine gun positions of the Myanmar army in succession. The Myanmar army's defense line was visibly shaken. They wanted to attack, but had no idea where to start. Chen Chen was also monitoring the radio communications of the Myanmar army. The electromagnetic environment of the battlefield was quite complex, and the conversations he could hear were intermittent. But through these fragmented sentences, he could still hear that the enemy was remobilizing anti-tank forces, intending to launch a devastating attack on the tanks that were continuously outputting firepowered. However, they still did not find the location of the reconnaissance team led by Li Bang on the high ground. All their actions were exposed. When there were obvious signs of unconventional deployment in the Myanmar army's positions, Li Bang's information also arrived. Enemy artillery positions spotted. A small caliber mountain howitzer, several mortars, and a recoilless rifle. The target has been dispersed. Report the location now. D4, C2, C3, C6. Please allocate firepower resources. Receive. Chen Chen quickly marked the location on the map, and at this time, the self-propelled artillery that had arrived at the designated battle position finally began to show its power. At a distance of 8 kilometers, relying on its own fire control radar, the SH-3 accurately projected shells into the D4 area. The howitzers of the Myanmar army were blown into a pile of scrap metal before they could even fire. In other areas, the hastily fired mortar shells fell on the open ground dozens of meters away from the tanks, without even causing a ripple. Subsequently, the second round of 107 rocket launches began to turn to the C2 area. At this distance, the accuracy of the rockets does not need to be considered, but after more than 30 rockets fell intensively, the mortar positions of the Myanmar army still quickly fell silent. Then, the infantry precision shooters who had followed the tanks to break through to a distance of 500 meters began to accurately shoot at the recoilless gun positions outside the trenches. The large-caliber anti-material rifle bullets directly shattered all the fantasies of the militiamen who were trying to operate the recoilless guns, and of course shattered their bodies as well. At this point, the battle had been going on for more than 10 minutes, and the infantry of both sides had not yet engaged in a head-on confrontation. But Chen Chen knew that everything was over. All obstacles that hinder the advance of the armored units have been cleared, and the control zone has been completely established. Next, the more resolute and rapid our actions are, the faster the enemy's defense will collapse. The moment of final decision has come. Chen Chen picked up the radio and decisively ordered, Firebird, execute Plan 2, and launch a blanket strike on the central brigade supporting the rear of the Namban position. Dongfeng Group 4, Group 5, quickly bypass and break into the enemy position. Tanks 3 and 4, cover the infantry assault, 200 meters away, execute, overtaking fire. Heavy Artillery Number 1. Extend the fire to the enemy's rear to prevent them from reinforcing. The rest of the artillery fire will implement infantry artillery coordinated tactics to cover the 7th Brigade's infantry breakthrough in the front. Clear. Advertisement. After the order was issued, the firepower density of the Dongfeng Corps increased sharply. The originally sparse gunfire suddenly became dense, and the Myanmar militiamen in the trenches finally found a target that could be shot for the first time. But they will soon discover that this is not necessarily a positive development at this moment in the trenches. The Myanmar militiamen who first shouted they missed the target remained extremely optimistic. When he saw the infantry of the Dongfeng Corps begin to advance, he even felt that his chance to make money had come. So he couldn't wait to stick his head out of the trench, picked up the Type 81 rifle, and tried to aim and shoot at the moving infantry in the distance. The searchlight had been destroyed, but in the light of the fire, he could still see that those vague shadows had reached his range. Aim, shoot, take cover. Although this set of movements is simple, he has practiced it many times. He believed that under the protection of the bunker, as long as he fired, the enemy would surely fall. Thinking of this, he took a deep breath, aligned the 3 points of the target with the notch, and slowly moved the muzzle of the gun, aiming at a figure that looked a little bloated. After a moment's pause, the trigger was gently pulled. Bang! The bullet hit the enemy accurately, and he shouted excitedly, I hit one. Hearing his words, the quartermaster behind him immediately threw a stack of money at him, and this action inspired the others around him. Stimulated by the real money, everyone seemed to have forgotten the horrific artillery fire half a minute ago and pointed their guns outside the position. He turned back trying to find his next target, but the next second, his excited expression froze in place. The knocked-down enemy stood up again, and the muzzle of the gun in his hand was pointing in his direction. The man's eyes were bloodshot, and at the same time, a loud shout suddenly came from behind him. Careful! Bang! He was knocked to the ground by a man who didn't even have a gun in his hand, and the bullet went over his head and hit the quartermaster behind him. The man looked at the bleeding wound on the quartermaster's neck in shock, not knowing what to do for a moment. The man who had knocked him down rushed forward and tried to give the quartermaster first aid, but he soon discovered that the man no longer needed any treatment. His cervical vertebrae were shattered by the large-caliber bullet. In just that instant, he had already died physiologically. Seeing this, Wu Jian, who did not bring a gun, shouted at the militia in frustration. Jin Duo, what the hell did I tell you? Don't shoot, don't shoot. Who do you think we are facing? A dozen of them can chase the people from the Kokong Border Defense Battalion around. Now they even have tanks. Are you crazy about getting rich? You don't even want to live anymore. Hearing the man's words, the militiaman named Jin Duo suddenly shuddered. At this moment, he suddenly came back to his senses from the greed and excitement of getting a large bounty, and his body began to tremble uncontrollably. Yes, I was really close to death just now. If it weren't for the man named Ning Ming who pounced on him, the person who was shot in the throat would not have been the quartermaster behind him. He huddled in a low trench, his eyes filled with fear. Ning Ming had already stuck his head out and quickly observed the situation, then lowered his voice and said, There's no chance. The battle is already over. Their infantry has already begun to advance. With your equipment, even if you have 10 times the number of troops, you may not be able to stop them. Run, follow me. Don't worry about the others, brother. Just follow me. The only way to survive is to run away. Hearing Ning Ming's words, Jin Duo nodded in surprise. He was about to stand up, but at this moment, a heavy mortar shell suddenly fell on the heavy machine gun position not far from him. The blast threw the old heavy machine gun into the air, and then it fell heavily next to him. He was knocked over by the shock wave of the explosion, and passed out after his eyes went dark. Then he opened his eyes again when Ning Ming kept calling him. He didn't feel how long it took from the time he fell into a coma to the time he woke up. It's just a blink of an eye. However, in the blink of an eye, the situation on the battlefield had changed dramatically. The seemingly solid defense line had completely collapsed, and 2 tanks were covering the infantry as they attacked from the west. The weapons in each of their hands were spewing flames, and behind them, the heavy machine guns on the tanks projected a crisscrossing web of fire. Within the range of the fire net, the soldiers in the trenches shrank back like gophers, and those who were a little slower were cut in half by large-caliber bullets. Broken limbs were flying everywhere. Jin Duo was so frightened that he even forgot what he was going to do. But Ning Ming behind him had already grabbed his arm and was desperately pulling him away from the tank. Jin Duo finally came to his senses. He struggled to stand up and followed Ning Ming, running away with his body hunched. Behind him, the sound of explosions continued, and in front of him, more comrades in arms had already fled like into corners that the tank's machine gun could not reach for the time being. Is this the end? They all ran away. Jin Duo turned back in disbelief, looking at the position that had been completely destroyed. He saw someone bravely stand up, raise the rocket launcher in his hand, and pointed at the tank, but the next second his head suddenly exploded. The sniper had already aimed at him. The The real purpose of those infantrymen was just to deal with the enemies who posed a threat to the tanks. However, the enemy's infantry was not enough after all. At the same time as one anti-tank man was killed, another man's rocket launcher had already fired a shell at the tank. Jean Duo's face lit up with joy, for he remembered that General Lin had said that as long as they could destroy the tanks, they would have something to fight for. Now, is the opportunity here? Unfortunately, it is not. The rocket hit the tank accurately at close range, but after a strange explosion, the tank emerged from the smoke intact. Reactive armor. The term that Ning Ming had mentioned before suddenly flashed through Jean Duo's mind. At this moment, there was no other thought in his mind. Run quickly. All the members of the Myanmar army were fleeing frantically. Under the attack of modern armored forces, these militia organizations, which were not even light infantry, had no energy to resist. The most powerful weapon in their hands is the rocket launcher, but even the rocket launcher cannot cause effective damage to the tanks in the chaotic battle. Jean Duo followed Ning Ming in the retreat. They no longer cared about the orders of those so-called supervisors. In fact, even the supervisors themselves were on the run. They foolishly chose to use vehicles, but it was obvious that anyone who could drive a car would be targeted as a high-value target. Artillery shells continued to explode near the vehicles, and heavy machine gun fire from high altitudes also bit them closely. No vehicle could escape the pursuit of the helicopter, and under the cover of night, infantry without guided weapons had no way to deal with the helicopter. This is the horror of air superiority. It creates not only a gap, but a generation gap. After another light pickup truck was blown up by the intensive firepower of the helicopter, Jean Duo and Ning Ming, who were traveling along the Mengla Highway, finally saw the Central Independent Brigade coming to support them. However, before he could get excited, a shell fell straight into the middle of the road. The armored vehicles that were only focused on advancing without any defense were overturned by the blast and knocked to the ground. The troops in the rear were all blocked. They wanted to pass and deploy, but with the command system having collapsed, all tactical deployments turned into chaos. Jean Duo was stunned. In fact, he knew that the Mongla army he belonged to was not that strong, not to mention compared with the already famous Dongfang Corps. Even compared with the 7th Brigade and other warlord armed forces in Shan State, it was relatively weak. But he never expected that after the battle began, the situation would develop in this direction. There was no bloody tug-of-war, no resolute resistance, and no desperate attack. The enemy only did one thing: attack us easily, using artillery fire and bullets to drive us around like pigs. How could we fight such a war? I am afraid that in the eyes of the enemy, all our actions were as childish and ridiculous as a child trying to compete with an adult. It's time to surrender, but judging by the Independent Brigade's movements, do they still want to fight? Jean Duo lay in the grass by the roadside, staring blankly at the sparks and blood that exploded in the Independent Brigade. Then he turned to Ning Ming and asked, "What should we do? Where should we go now?" Ning Ming smiled bitterly and replied, "How should I know what to do? I just came here to make a living. If they hadn't lost money in business, who the hell would join this army? I still think that Mengla and Kokong have a good relationship, so I won't come to Lin Mingxin's place. They've only been here for less than a month, and they've already started a fight with the Dongfang Corps. If I had known, I would have run away when we were digging the trenches. Damn, those supervisors were watching too closely. Just lie down, it won't take long to finish. After this battle, I will definitely go to the Dongfang Corps, even if I have to beg them on my knees." "You still want to fight?" Jean Duo asked in surprise. "Who wants to fight? I only know how to fight. In the entire Pubei, the Dongfang Corps is the strongest team. Since we have to fight for food, why don't we go to them? It's just that it's not that easy to get into the Dongfang Corps. Last time I..." Having said this, Ning Ming suddenly fell silent. He recalled his last conversation with Chen Chen. At that time, he had other things on his mind and was hoping to make some money by reselling jade, so he didn't really care about Chen Chen. But now, he suddenly realized that Chen Chen's attitude towards him at that time should not have been one of lack of trust. That being said, even if I could survive this time, it would be difficult for me to join the Dongfang Corps. They all have their own credentials, and they all have value. Ning Ming's eyes changed, and he had already made up his mind. So, he looked at Jean Duo and asked, "Do you want to fight with me for great wealth? It's good enough to survive, but how can you be rich?" Jean Duo was extremely depressed. He had already seen that he was bound to lose the battle. What he was most worried about now was his own future after the battle. He had heard that even prisoners could not survive in the hands of the Dongfang Corps. Looking at Jean Duo's expression, which flickered in the firelight, Ning Ming took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "The Dongfang Corps has no precedent of killing prisoners. I mean, they don't kill ordinary people. Advertisement, we can go and cast them, but we have to bring something with us. Lin Mingxian is definitely going to run away. If we can help the Dongfang Corps catch Lin Mingxian..." Ning Ming did not continue speaking, but Jean Duo already understood what he meant. "Catch General Lin? Him? What General Lin? It's Lin and I, Lin the dog. Lin and I is not easy to catch. He ran away before the battle started, taking his private soldiers with him. As long as we know where he is, it will be fine. We are one of us. Lin Go will definitely not be on guard. He must be packing up his things in his mansion and preparing to flee. Let's rush over and catch him. Let me tell you, this way of making money is much more than killing people on the battlefield. If we can bring him back alive, I wonder how much money the Dongfang Corps will give us." Jean Duo was tempted, but he couldn't make a decision immediately. He was still fantasizing or worrying about the situation changing. What if Lin Mingxian has a backup plan that can suddenly turn the tide? What if his last armored vehicle can take out a few tanks? What if his artillery went bang, 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 bang? A series of explosions interrupted Jean Duo's thoughts, and he was horrified to see fire rain falling from the sky. The real helicopter attack began. 108 rockets fell one by one at a steady and resolute speed. The Central Independent Brigade, which had already dispersed and was preparing to enter the Namban battlefield, began to disintegrate like a camel broken by the last straw. They originally claimed to be the strongest fighting force in Mengla, but it is obvious that there is a difference between strong and strong. No matter how strong a mouse is, it is still a mouse. It may beat a cat, but it can never beat a tiger. With rockets pouring down, 2 tanks whizzed past the road beside Jin Duo at lightning speed, and behind the tanks followed a light pickup truck used to transport infantry. The enemy began to use vehicles for maneuvering, which meant that the Namban defense line was completely lost. There was no hope. Or rather, another kind of hope was beginning to emerge. Jin Duo no longer hesitated, but answered firmly, "Done. Try hard, and your bicycle will turn into a motorcycle. Let's go. Let's go into the city. The Central Independent Brigade will definitely hide in the city. We will follow the chaotic soldiers and retreat." At this moment, Jin Duo's thoughts became extremely clear. After seeing his reaction, Ning Ming pulled him up without hesitation. "Hurry up then. The Dongfeng Corps will not allow the Independent Brigade to withdraw. They don't want to fight in Mengla City. Their tanks are here to block the retreat route. We have to get ahead of them. Go, go. Kill the forest dog and make a fortune. Cut off the Central Independent Brigade's retreat. Armored vehicles, push forward. They no longer have the will to resist. Don't arrest them, just block the road. The assault team will enter the city first. Enter the city first. Control the key traffic points. Firebird, come back to pick up the people. Air raid operation." Chen Chen issued orders one by one, but soon he found that the entire battlefield command had fallen into chaos. It was not because the Dongfeng Corps was at a disadvantage. On the contrary, it was because their current advantage was too great. The enemy was simply unable to fight back, and they were fleeing all over the mountains and plains. However, due to the large sum of money that Lin Mingxian had given them in advance, these defeated soldiers generally made a decision that should not have occurred on the battlefield of man versus man. That is, don't surrender, just run away. They all knew that the Dongfeng Corps' target was Mengla City, so they all believed that as long as they did not stand in the way of the Dongfeng Corps' advance, everything would be fine. This is actually a solution, but the problem is that their choice caused great interference to the Dongfeng Corps. In the absence of a complete real-time command system, the communication between various combat units was compressed to the lowest level, and it could even be said that each group was fighting on its own. Chen Chen finally understood what it felt like to catch 50,000 pigs, and he also knew that if the situation was allowed to continue to develop, his own combat plan would be completely disrupted, and the operation against Mengla would fail in a strange way. Therefore, since he was unable to fully control the 7th Brigade, he could only choose to concentrate the core forces of the Dongfeng Corps to launch an attack on Mengla first and seize key points. Fortunately, the Dongfeng Corps had sufficient execution capabilities. Under the cover of helicopters, the assault team quickly occupied the roundabout outside Mengla City, established fire points there, and controlled all access to and from Mengla. Hebupa, quickly contact Bangxiong and ask him to speed up the march. The threat from Mengla has been lifted. There is no need to consider the risk of an attack. His people must arrive as soon as possible. I need more troops to control the situation. This amount of manpower is not enough to completely disarm the Mengla army. Understood. Bangxiong has arrived in Jingdong and is expected to arrive within 2 hours. On the radio, Hebupa, who was also extremely worried, replied very quickly. There is no doubt that he was a little confused at this time. He has won battles, and he has also lost battles. It is normal to feel proud when you win a battle, and to feel embarrassed when you lose a battle. But he never imagined that one day he would be in such a state of panic, even after winning an undoubted victory. What happened? According to the plan, after the vanguard of the army dispersed the Mengla army with armored forces, shouldn't they surrender as a whole? Why are these people not only refusing to surrender, but also running around? The situation was very strange. He even noticed on the front line that some defeated soldiers of the Mengla army did not even want their guns. They had no will to resist, and it was unlikely that they could even be reorganized. But if it's like this, why do they still run? Money is given. Hebupa suddenly came to his senses. Lin Mingxian must have distributed a large amount of cash before the war, giving the militiamen a reason to run away. That's right, if they ran away, the money would still be theirs. But if he didn't run away, the money he had already obtained might have to be confiscated. After figuring this out, Hebupa was in a state of confusion. Paying soldiers before they are sent to the battlefield is a very common practice. It has occurred in countless wars in history and does play a certain role. But the problem is that that only applies to regular troops. What on earth are you thinking, Lin Mingxian, that you actually pay these half farmers and half soldiers who are just trying to make a living? It seems that Lin Mingxian is good at building relationships, but he is really not good at leading troops. Thinking of this, Hebupa turned on the radio again and reported to Chen Chen. Lin Mingxian has issued a bounty to the Mengla army. Now there is money among these militiamen, so they have to run. Don't worry about them. Let them run. There's no way they can be reorganized. The most important thing now is to capture Lin Mingxian. You can ignore everything outside and let them mess around. As long as we take down Lin Mingxian, everything will be over. Hebupa's words were a bit confusing. In fact, while reporting, he was constantly making gestures to issue orders to his subordinates, trying to convey his intentions as quickly as possible. So it was good enough that he could maintain basic logic. And from his confusing statement, Chen Chen also quickly separated out the most critical information. It is impossible to be reorganized, so there is no need for all the people under his command to stay on the periphery. After maintaining basic defensive strength, the best option is to concentrate your forces and attack Mengla directly. To capture Lin Mingxian, we have to find Lin Mingxian's location. But no one knows where he is hiding now. Thinking of this, Chen Chen gave another order. The artillery positions are moving forward, preparing to attack the main city of Mengka. All combat units, abandon the pursuit of the fleeing soldiers and gather at the Mengla roundabout position. Don't worry about the Central Independent Brigade. They have completely given up resistance. Hold the roundabout and wait for support. Tanks 3 and 4 cooperate with the Firebird and go to Taping to meet the 756th Brigade and ensure the smooth flow of the Mengla Highway. All teams of the Dongfeng Corps, follow my command and prepare to enter Mengla. After saying that, Chen Chen patted the shoulder of the short-legged driver of the Mengsher. The latter understood and stepped on the accelerator. The Mengsher command vehicle bypassed the bombed Mengla Highway and headed north. It took only a few minutes to pass through the battle zone of the Namban position and arrived at the Mengla roundabout where defenses had been established. The terrain here is quite dangerous. In fact, the Central Independent Brigade of the Mengla Army also built simple barricades here, but no barricade could withstand the bombardment of 155mm caliber howitzers. When the assault team arrived here, the militia of the Central Independent Brigade, originally stationed here, had already run away without a trace. The assault team re-established the defense line, and the machine gun pickup deployed 4 heavy machine gun fire points, blocking the only main road into Mengla from the outside. Li Bang, who was originally monitoring on the mountain, has also led his team to the island. After meeting with Chen Chen, he immediately reported the information he had just confirmed to Chen Chen. Lin Mingxian has entered the Mengla city area, and we have lost sight of him. He left as soon as the battle started. He probably had no intention of resisting at all. He may want to cross the border into the north. We must stop him. Otherwise, need not. Chen Chen shook his head and interrupted Li Bang's narration, then said, he can't get through the port. I've already communicated with Xiu Yu. As long as Lin Mingxian dares to show up in the north, he will be immediately controlled. He must still be in Mengla. Immediately arrange for people to block the western exit of Mengla City to prevent him from escaping westward. Group 4, Group 5, follow me. We need to complete the search of Lin Mingxian's several hiding places and find him as soon as possible. We have to be quick. If he hides, it will be almost impossible for us to find him. Advertisement clear. Everyone answered immediately and then set off. Chen Chen personally joined the battlefield again. In his hand, he held the familiar 416 Hong Kong dollars, which was more suitable for CQB operations than SCAR. He took 2 teams including Yang Shu, Ai Jiao, and Lin He and drove into Mengla, heading straight for the first target whose location had already been determined. At the same time, at the corner of the street outside Lin Mingxian's villa, 2 furtive figures were hiding in the shadows where the street lights could not reach, monitoring every move in the villa where the lights were already on. In order to cover their bodies, they hid behind garbage dumps. The foul smell penetrated into their nasal cavity uncontrollably, and the sticky touch of various rotting household garbage made them feel nauseous. The sound of gunfire continued to ring out outside Xiamengla. This small town was destined to have a sleepless night, but the irony was that in such a big battle, the residents in the city did not react at all. Most of the lights were off and most of the shops were locked. There were no fleeing crowds on the streets, and even the area near the port was calm. This is weird. It is human instinct to seek benefits and avoid harm. If it were somewhere else, the city would probably have been in chaos long ago. You know, back then in Kokong, the 4 major families merely revealed the signal that war is possible, which triggered a mass escape of nearly 10,000 people. But in Mengla, it seemed as if no one was aware of the sound of the firecrackers, as if it was just a firework set off at the end of the year. A mouse ran quickly across the garbage dump, and the wild cat that had been waiting for a long time quickly pounced on it. The fight between the cat and the mouse knocked over the can, making a loud noise. Jean Duo, who was lying on the ground, was startled by the sound. After he came to his senses, he lowered his voice and asked Ning Ming beside him, Brother Ning, are we really going to arrest Lin Mingxian? Did you see that? He has at least dozens of private soldiers around him. We can't get close to him at all. He was too cautious. He had already arranged a retreat. He should be running away soon. We don't even have a car, so we can't catch up with him even if we want to. This is a very realistic problem. Although Ning Ming wants to catch or kill Lin Mingxian, it is not so easy to do so if he really wants to. The other side is not a fool. They will not wait on their own territory when they know that the Dongfeng Corps is about to attack. He will definitely run, and he will definitely run to a place that no one can guess or find. Thinking of this, Ning Ming said, I know we can't keep up. We have to take the initiative to find him. The environment in Mengla is too complicated, and Lin Mingxian is an old fox. He keeps running and hiding, and even gods can't find him. Why else do you think I said that wealth and honor can only be found through risk? Only if you take the initiative to find him and follow him will you have a chance. Follow him. Jean Duo widened his eyes and continued. This is too dangerous. Let's not talk about whether he can trust us. Even if he trusts us and lets us follow him, how can we have the chance to kill him? Even if we really kill him, can we still escape? How is this possible? Brother Ning, how about we just stop doing this? Jean Duo's words clearly revealed his desire to retreat. After all, after his initial enthusiasm, he finally realized the danger of this big thing he was about to do. No matter how weak Lin Mingxian is, he is still a local leader after all. With only 2 men and 2 guns, how could we catch him? No, let alone catching him. Even simply following him could lead to death. Yes, he knew Ning Ming was right. And he also knew that if he could catch Lin Mingxian, he would have endless wealth and glory in the future. But the problem is, that also requires survival. He is a soldier, but also an ordinary person. Compared to risking his life to make a lot of money, the 2,000 yuan in his pocket is enough to satisfy him. However, after hearing his words, Ning Ming did shake his head firmly and said, Aren't you tired of this kind of life? They always ride on our heads and shit on us. Everything we do depends on the faces of those big shots. Have you ever thought that one day we could become big shots too? I've been to so many places. I've seen it all. I have to give it a try. I also want to be the best. Brother, if you don't want to do this, leave now. But don't get caught. Even if you were caught, don't give me away. After Ning Ming finished speaking, Jean Duo hesitated for a long time and finally sighed. Brother Ning, I can't do it anymore. I have to go. I have a wife and children at home. I'm afraid of death. Ning Ming's eyes changed, and after a few seconds of silence, he finally nodded. Come on, be careful. Go from the back. I'll take you there. Leave the gun to me. Be careful of the bullets. I know. Jean Duo nodded gratefully and said no more. In fact, he still has a good impression of Ning Ming. Although the other party was considered an outsider in Mengla and did not get along well with many people here, Jean Duo could see that he was not a bad person at heart. If one had to say something, it was just that he was too arrogant. At times like this, If the other party wants to give you a hand and take you to do something big, there is no doubt that his intention is good. It's just that he couldn't seize this opportunity. The two of them quietly got up and retreated all the way backward. Jin Duo didn't look back, while Ning Ming watched the movements in the villa vigilantly, fearing that he would be discovered by the guards. When they finally retreated to the street, they were out of sight of the villa. Jin Duo waved to Ning Ming and prepared to leave, but at this moment, Ning Ming suddenly called him in a low voice. Golden Helm, wait a minute. Jin Duo turned his head and then froze in place. Ning Ming had already raised his gun, with the black muzzle pointing at his head. Don't leave. I'm worried. There are not many big soldiers like us who have retreated to this city. If you are caught and exposed, I will not be able to do my job. Listen to me. Just stay here. When I finish my work, you will still get your share of the money. Jin Duo was stunned. He wanted to say something, but found that it would be unnecessary to say anything. Indeed, Ning Ming's worries are justified. It only took the Dongfeng Corps a dozen minutes to defeat the Munlao army, but no one knew when they would be able to actually enter the city. If the news leaked out, not only would Ning Ming's plan not be accomplished, but the private soldiers under Lin Mingxian's command would not let him go. Although the probability of such a thing happening is very low, is it necessary for Ning Ming to take the risk? He didn't kill himself directly, which might be considered as a kind act. Thinking of this, Jin Duo felt a chill all over his body. He suddenly realized that the man in front of him was probably not as simple as he thought. Is he crazy? No, he's just going to extremes. He was really determined to take this huge fortune at the risk of his life. Ning Ming finally blocked Jin Duo's mouth, tied his hands and feet, and tied him to an unfinished building not far from Lin Mingxian's villa. Jin Duo always cooperated because he knew that no matter what, he could at least survive. After dealing with his problem, Ning Ming immediately returned to the corner of the street and continued to observe the movements in Lin Mingxian's villa. According to his speculation, it was impossible for Lin Mingxian to stay in such an obvious hiding place. The reason why he had to return to the villa first was nothing more than two reasons. First, he needed to pack up his belongings so that he would not be too embarrassed during the subsequent escape, and at the same time increase his chances of survival. Second, Lin Mingxian must explain the situation to his entire family and arrange their retreat. Those who can leave, and those who cannot leave should at least deal with it clearly to avoid being betrayed and having their whereabouts exposed. The time required for these two things will not be too short, but it will definitely not be too long either. Therefore, I must seize the time. However, how to get close to Lin Mingxian, how to stay by his side, and how to grasp his movements in real time is a real problem. Ning Mingxian originally planned to directly follow Lin Mingxian's convoy, but after actually arriving at the opponent's first stronghold, he discovered that the so-called tracking work was not so easy to do. Lin Mingxian is an old fox. When faced with such a situation where he is bound to lose, he will no longer rashly lead a large army out. Instead, he will definitely deploy many means to confuse the pursuers. In some cases, even aerial reconnaissance is meaningless because there is a tunnel in Lin Mingxian's villa, and he might have already escaped from the tunnel by now. Therefore, he had to act quickly and bring Lin Mingxian what he wanted most in order to gain his trust. What does Lin Mingxian want? What does he have in his hands? What the other party wants is naturally safety, an opportunity to retreat unscathed even if he has to give up most of his family property. However, the current Dongfeng Corps would not let Lin Mingxian live, and they did not even give Lin Mingxian a chance to communicate. This means that if he could get Lin Mingxian in touch with the Dongfeng Corps, he would definitely be able to gain his trust. Logically speaking, in wartime, it would be impossible for him to contact the high-ranking officials of the Dongfeng Corps, even if he had a connection with them and had fought together before. But it was just a coincidence. Due to the complicated relationship between the Dongfeng Corps and the Allied forces, there really was such a relationship in front of him. From Peng Diren to Bao Yucheng to Bao Qi, and then to the sinking ship. I have met all of them once, and as a staunch supporter of the Peng family, I am actually quite close to Peng Diren. Even when they left the Allied forces, the two sides did not fall out with each other, but only left each other with a sentence, "Don't forget your old brother when you get rich in the future." In addition to the complicated relationship between Lin Mingxian and the Peng family, in this situation, if I can act as a middleman, I will definitely be able to gain Lin Mingxian's trust. The plan is very complete, you can give it a try. Lin Mingxian instantly became alert. He thought for a moment, then ran straight to the villa with a gun in hand. When he rushed to the door of the villa, the first thing he did was to hide behind a car on the street, and then shouted to the security guard at the door. "I want to see General Lin. I have information. I know what the Dongfeng Corps wants. They can talk." As soon as the words fell, the security guard on the other side, who had been so nervous that he had pointed his gun, immediately relaxed. In fact, this also proves the unprofessionalism of Lin Mingxian's team. After all, if it were Chen Chen, at this extremely tense moment, anyone who dared to approach the security area would be greeted with a volley of heavy machine gun bullets. Of course, it was precisely because Ning Ming knew that Lin Mingxian would never do this that he dared to rush forward so recklessly. Soon, there was a response from the security guards at the villa, who shouted at him to put down his gun, raise his hands, and walk closer. Ning Ming hesitated for a few seconds, but finally gritted his teeth and walked forward. He was really determined to give it a try. He desperately needed this chance to turn things around. Moreover, he did not want to start from the bottom, because he knew that the current Dongfeng Corps was no longer the same as before. When it needed manpower the most, he did not choose it firmly. So now, if he wanted to reach the same height again, he could only take out credit that others could not get. After a quick but strict body search, Ning Ming finally entered the villa. Just as he expected, the villa was in chaos at this time. There were scattered luggage everywhere. Lin Mingxian's family stood at a loss in the hall of the villa waiting for arrangements. The security guards, who were obviously insufficient in number, not only had to guard the perimeter, but also had to help those weak old men carry their luggage. Ning Ming looked around, but did not see Lin Mingxian himself. He was received by Lin Mingxian's adjutant, who had a serious face and asked very quickly, "You said you know what the Dongfeng Corps wants? Are you one of them?" Ning Ming quickly shook his head and then replied, I'm not one of them. In fact, I don't know what they want. I'm just saying this because I want to see you. They're connected to the Allied forces. You may not know that one of their top brass, named Bao Qi, is the son of Bao Yucheng of the Allied forces. Through Bao Yucheng, you can stop talking and get out. The adjutant interrupted Ning Ming without hesitation, and the latter stood there in amazement. At least listen to me. I have connections. I've dealt with them. I'm friends with Bao Qi. Get him out. The security guards around him immediately raised their guns. At this moment, Ning Ming suddenly realized that he had been overthinking. What might seem extremely reasonable and tempting to him were worthless to them. He suddenly felt a little regretful. Maybe I was really blinded by desire. Maybe I was really eager to achieve merit. But now it was too late to say anything. Looking at the gun pointed straight at him, Ning Ming's eyes suddenly changed. He raised his hands obediently, and the security guards escorted him to the door. He knew very well that just as he would not let Jean Duo go easily, the people here would not let him go easily either. However, compared to the previous one, his adventurous action did bring a slight advantage. I have indeed entered the villa. At this time, there were only 6 security guards in the villa hall. Due to the large number of Lin Mingxian's family members, most of the security guards' shooting range was blocked. They are afraid of hurting those innocent people, but they are not afraid of themselves. As long as there is a gun, just one. At the same time, a few streets away, in another villa of Lin Mingxian, Chen Chen had just led a team to complete the search of the villa, but unfortunately, they did not find any trace of Lin Mingxian. In fact, after seeing the defense of this villa, Chen Chen was almost certain that there could be no high-value targets inside. The reason is simple. The defense here is too weak, so weak that even the security guards have almost all withdrawn, leaving only a few housekeepers and nannies. These people did not put up any resistance. After the Dongfeng Corps launched a combination of power outage and stun grenades, everyone rushed to surrender. But when Chen Chen asked about Lin Mingxian's whereabouts, no one could explain it. Under the muzzle of the gun, a man who looked like a butler knelt trembling in front of Chen Chen, shaking his head and waving his hands frantically, while telling everyone what he knew in an attempt to clear himself of the suspicion of non-cooperation. That I really don't know where Lin Mingxian went. He left a long time ago. Advertisement. He owns several properties in Mengla, including the Grand Lisboa Hotel. He hasn't been back for more than a week. Yes, his third wife used to live here, but she left yesterday. I don't know where they went. Lin Mingxian didn't tell me at all. Boss, Commander, please, I am just an ordinary citizen. I have nothing to do with Lin Mingxian. Please let me go. I still have a family. Listening to the housekeeper's plea for mercy, the expression on Chen Chen's face did not change at all. He looked at Li Bang, who had just finished searching the basement, and returned to his side. Li Bang shook his head and said, just like what this guy said, no tunnel was found. Lin Mingxian should not be here. He has too many businesses and hiding places in Mengla. We are not that lucky. What do you mean, continue searching? Chen Chen shook his head and replied, we can't just search blindly. We have to find some clues. Lin Mingxian is now like a rat. Once he dives into the sewer, we can only turn the sewer upside down if we want to find him. The situation outside is very tense. We have a great advantage, but it is almost impossible to completely annihilate the Mongol army. If we let them gather together again, and the command falls into the hands of others, it may not be a good thing for us. Try to call Lin Mingxian again, using the housekeeper's phone to see if he answers. Clear. Li Bang nodded, reached out to take out his cell phone, and dialed Lin Mingxian's number that had been saved in it again. But unfortunately, the owner of the phone not only didn't answer, but even turned off the phone. I have to say that Lin Mingxian is still quite cautious. The more cautious he is, the more difficult it will be for the Dongfeng Corps to achieve a perfect operation. Chen Chen frowned, and now he wanted to torture the butler. But he also knew that no matter how hard he tried, he would not be able to get anything out of this man's mouth. Did he really get away? Although before the war, he did say that Lin Mingxian was not important and there was no need to organize a decapitation operation for the time being. But the thing is, the situation changes in real time. Who could have thought that the battle would turn out like this? Who could have thought that the Mengla army could not even launch a useful counterattack, and the difficulty for the army was not how to annihilate them, but how to gather the defeated soldiers? Who could have thought that Lin Mingxian actually eliminated the possibility of the Mengla army surrender as a whole by paying salaries before the war and dragged the Dongfeng Corps into the chaos of a temporary security war? Under such circumstances, Lin Mingxian had to be arrested. If they don't capture him, they won't be able to take over the supreme command of the Mengla army, nor will they be able to quickly put an end to the chaos that is spreading. Of course, the Dongfeng Corps can also choose to slowly waste time with them. After all, relying on heavy firepower, it is not too difficult to eat away at Mengla bit by bit and control the Mengla army bit by bit. But Chen Chen really didn't want to gamble. After all, the catch inside was still eyeing him covetously. Thinking of this, Chen Chen turned to the housekeeper kneeling on the ground again. He wanted to try again to see if he could pry something out of the other person's mouth. But just as he was about to speak, a series of gunshots suddenly came from outside the door. Bang, 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 bang. Chen Chen immediately became alert and asked into the radio, where's the gunshot coming from? Who is moving around in the city? A moment later, Bupa's reply came over the radio. There's no one in town, not one of ours. Understood. Let's go. At Chen Chen's command, all members of the assault team immediately took action. Li Bang quickly gathered the team together and knocked out all the people kneeling on the ground one by one with the butt of his gun. Then he quickly dragged them together and locked them in the room. This series of movements was so smooth that Chen Chen was stunned. 1 minute later, following the ongoing gunfire, the assault team left the villa at full speed and rushed towards the direction of the gunfire. The distance was not far. After traveling less than 600 meters, the assault team arrived at the target building. At this time, the villa, which was originally on Lin Mingxian's list of hiding places, was still in the crossfire. There was intensive gunfire coming from the villa. Several private soldiers outside the villa were using vehicles and low walls as cover to fire into the villa. But obviously, they couldn't hit anything, Screams and painful wails overflowed from the window of the villa. The chaotic situation made it impossible for Chen Chen to even distinguish between friend and foe. After a brief thought, he gave the order. Turn off the lights. Kill all those with guns. Clear. Li Bang fired a rifle grenade at the transformer outside the villa. After a loud bang, the villa with independent power supply was instantly plunged into darkness. The two sides in battle paused for a moment, but before they could react, the Dongfeng Corps' attack had already begun. With the support of thermal fusion night vision goggles, the Dongfeng Corps' attack was not hindered at all. The private soldiers in front of the villa fell down one after another like dummies in a shooting range. After throwing 2 stun grenades, the Dongfeng Corps entered the villa in a standard double-column cross formation, spread out in a wave-like manner, and quickly took control of the situation. It also took less than a minute to clean the house, and after the entire villa was under control, Chen Chen finally came to his senses and observed the situation inside, dead bodies all over the floor. At least 20 bodies lay in a pool of blood, and these bodies were definitely not the work of the Dongfeng Corps, because after they entered the door, they fired less than 20 shots in total. It was a massacre. Chen Chen's face was as gloomy as water at the massacre of unarmed civilians, and at this moment, a man's hand stretched out from under a corpse. His voice was a little weak, but what he said shocked Chen Chen. Don't shoot, I'm Ning Ming. I know where Lin Mingxian is.